Find a comfortable place to settle in, perhaps under a warm blanket or by a window where the light is dim. The world outside can be loud, but here, we let the shadows tell their stories at a slower pace. Whether you are closing your eyes for the night, focusing on your work, or simply passing the time, you are in good company. We will wander through the strange, the unexplained, and the quiet corners of the unknown together. You are listening to Ambient Whispers. If these stories brought you comfort, please leave a like. We invite you to comment and tell us where this whisper was heard tonight. Please subscribe and let these stories be the embers that light your soul. The stories of the Holy Grail. Welcome back to Ambient Whisper. Today, we are settling in for a long, quiet journey into one of the greatest enigmas of human history. As you find a comfortable spot to rest, let the world outside fade away. We are going to explore the shifting shadows and golden glimmers of the Holy Grail. This story is not one of fast-paced chases or loud discoveries. Instead, it is a slow walk through ancient dusty rooms, mist-covered hills, and the silent, stone-walled chambers of Old Jerusalem. To understand the Grail, we have to start in a very quiet place, long before it became a legend of knights and kings. Imagine a small, dimly lit room in Jerusalem, known as the cenacle or the upper room. The air is still, and the smell of unleavened bread and wine lingers. It is here that the story of the Last Supper takes place, and it is here that the first mystery begins. When we think of a royal treasure, we often imagine gold and heavy jewels, but the reality of that night was likely much more humble. There is a deep, peaceful mystery in the idea that a simple vessel, perhaps made of olive wood or common limestone, could become the most sought-after relic in the world. Some believe it was a standard Passover cup, used by a group of friends during a traditional meal. Others suggest it might have been a hidden heirloom, a piece of craftsmanship passed down through generations, disguised as an everyday object. Archaeologists have spent lifetimes studying the cenacle, looking for hidden chambers beneath the ancient floors and hoping to find any sign of the vessels left behind by the disciples. It is a quiet, patient search, and the thought of such a powerful object sitting in the darkness of a forgotten cellar for centuries is a heavy, intriguing thought that stays with you. The story does not end in that upper room, as it moves into a much darker, more somber space with a man named Joseph of Arimathea. According to the old legends, Joseph was the one who took the cup from the cenacle to the hill of the crucifixion. In this version of the mystery, the Grail becomes a vessel of transition, used to collect the blood of Jesus, an act that transformed the object forever. But the journey that followed was not one of glory. Joseph was reportedly imprisoned for many years, cast into a cold, lonely cell where the world forgot him. The legends tell us that he did not wither away in that darkness, but was instead sustained by the presence of the Grail. It provided him with light, with peace, and with the strength to endure the passing of decades. It is a story about the quiet power of an object to provide comfort when everything else is lost. When Joseph was finally released, he began a long, meandering journey toward the distant, misty shores of Britain. He carried the Grail with him, keeping it close and keeping it secret. The image of a solitary man walking through the ancient forests and over the rolling green hills, carrying a treasure that could change the world, is a lonely and beautiful trek into the unknown. Eventually, the legend brings us to a place of marshes and heavy fogs, a landscape that feels as though it belongs to another world entirely. This is where the Grail was said to be hidden forever, tucked away in the earth or beneath the waters of a sacred spring. The mystery of its final resting place invites us to look at the landscape differently, where every old well or crumbling stone wall feels like it could be the guardian of the secret. The Grail is no longer just a cup. It is part of the earth itself. It is a mystery that does not want to be solved quickly. It wants to be felt, like the cool air of an autumn evening. The search for the Grail is not about the gold. It is about the feeling of the unknown and the sense that there are things in this world that are old, powerful, and very, very quiet. As we conclude this reflection, we can rest easy knowing that some secrets are meant to stay hidden, wrapped in the soft blankets of history and legend. Continuing our journey through the mist and the passage of time, the story of the Grail shifts from the dusty rooms of Jerusalem to the grand, echoing halls of Camelot. This is where the legend truly begins to breathe, finding its way into the songs of poets and the dreams of knights. It was a writer named Cratin de Troyes who first brought this mystery to the wider world, though in his telling, the object was not yet the cup we know today. Instead, it appeared as a mysterious, glowing dish carried through a silent hall by a beautiful maiden. The air in that room was heavy with a strange, expectant stillness. The mystery here lies in a young knight named Percival and a single missed opportunity. He sat before the wounded Fisher King, whose land had become a barren, gray wasteland, reflecting the king's own broken spirit. Percival saw the glowing vessel, yet he remained silent, failing to ask the one right question that would have brought healing to the king and life back to the earth. It is a quiet, haunting reminder of how the greatest mysteries often require us to speak from the heart at just the right moment. As the years drifted by, the shape of the Grail continued to change in the minds of those who sought it. Wolfram von Eschenbach offered a different, more celestial vision in his epic story of Parzival. In his eyes, the Grail was not a vessel at all, but a precious stone known as the lapis exilis. This was a stone from heaven, said to have fallen from the crown of an angel during a great war in the stars. It possessed a cold, otherworldly beauty, and held the power to provide infinite food and eternal youth to those who guarded it. This version of the story makes the Grail feel less like a relic of the earth, and more like a fragment of the cosmos, a lonely diamond reflecting a light that does not belong to our world. It reminds us that the Grail is whatever the soul needs it to be, a source of physical life, or a beacon of spiritual truth. Within the walls of King Arthur's court, the mystery of the Grail was woven into the very furniture of the Round Table. There was one chair, the Siege Perilous, that always remained empty, draped in a heavy silence. It was a seat protected by ancient, powerful enchantments, reserved only for the one knight destined to find the Holy Grail. To sit there without being the chosen one was to invite a sudden and terrifying fate, as the earth itself was said to open up and swallow the unworthy. The knights would pass by that empty chair with a sense of awe and a quiet shudder, waiting for the day a knight of perfect purity, Sir Galahad, would arrive to claim it. This enchanted seat represents the weight of destiny, the idea that some paths are set in stone long before we are born, waiting for us to find the courage to sit down and begin the final, longest walk into the light of the unknown. As we move further into the shadows of the Middle Ages, the mystery of the Grail becomes intertwined with the stories of those who swore their lives to protect it. Among these, none are more shrouded in legend than the Knights Templar. It is whispered that during their long years spent excavating beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, they found something more than just gold or ancient scrolls. Many believe they discovered the Grail itself, and that its presence was the true source of their sudden, immense wealth and influence. When the order was finally suppressed in 1307, the treasure did not fall into the hands of the king. Instead, it supposedly vanished into the night, sparking centuries of quiet searches for a lost fleet of ships and hidden vaults that might still hold the secret. The thought of a treasure so powerful that it had to be hurried away into the darkness of history is a chilling, beautiful part of this long journey. But what if the Grail was never a physical object to begin with? A different, more controversial mystery suggests that a secret society known as the Priory of Sion has been moving through the background of history, guarding a truth far more dangerous than a simple cup. In this version of the story, the Grail is a secret so profound that its revelation could topple the very foundations of the world as we know it. It is a thought that makes the skin prickle, the idea that the Grail might be a bloodline or a hidden piece of knowledge, kept safe by a long line of silent guardians who watch us from the peripheral of our vision, waiting for the right moment to speak. Finally, we find ourselves in the rugged, windswept heights of southern France, at the fortress of Montségur. Here lived the Cathars, a religious group who found themselves hunted during a long and somber crusade. During the final siege of their mountain stronghold, as the fires burned below, 4 members of the group reportedly escaped by scaling down the sheer, terrifying cliffs under the cover of a moonless night. They were said to be carrying a great treasure, something they valued more than their own lives. Many believe this treasure was the Holy Grail, taken from the heights of the mountain and hidden deep within the limestone caves of the Pyrenees. Even today, the air around those caves feels heavy and still, as if the earth itself is holding its breath, protecting a secret that was never meant to be found by the light of day. This sense of devotion, of people risking everything to keep a spark of light safe in a dark world, is perhaps the most enduring mystery of all. As our journey brings us closer to the present, we begin to look at the objects that we can actually touch and see. These are the physical contenders, the artifacts that sit in quiet chapels and glass cases, each carrying a heavy weight of history. The most famous of these is the Santo Cáliz, kept in a beautiful cathedral in Valencia, Spain. This cup, carved from dark red agate, feels as though it holds the very essence of the ancient world. It has been dated back to the 1st century before the Common Era, meaning it truly could have been on the table in that upper room in Jerusalem. The mystery follows its long, silent journey from the Holy City to Rome, and eventually into the hands of Saint Lawrence. It is said he sent it away to Spain for safekeeping, hidden from those who would destroy it. Looking at its smooth, polished surface, one can't help but wonder about the thousands of hands that have held it in prayer over 2,000 years. Far away from the golden altars of Spain, we find a much humbler object in the green, mist-heavy hills of Wales. This is the Nantio's cup, a small and weathered wooden bowl that once resided in the Grand Nantio's mansion. Unlike the agate of Valencia, this cup is simple and worn, yet it was famous for centuries because of its reported healing properties. Sick and weary travelers would come from miles away just to touch the wood or drink water that had rested within it. Believers claim this is the very cup brought to Britain by Joseph of Arimathea, the one he carried through the forests and marshes we spoke of earlier. It was supposedly hidden within the walls of Glastonbury Abbey for a long time, moved only when the agents of King Henry VIII began to dissolve the monasteries. There is something deeply comforting about the idea that the true Grail might not be a jewel-encrusted treasure, but a simple, broken bowl of wood, hidden in the quiet corners of the countryside. Finally, we turn our gaze to the Sacro Catino, a striking emerald green bowl kept in Genoa. For hundreds of years, people traveled across oceans to see it, believing it was carved from a single, massive emerald of immense value. While later studies revealed it was actually made of ancient, high-quality glass, the mystery of its origin has never truly faded. Some still believe it was the dish used to serve the Paschal lamb during the Last Supper, a silent witness to the events of that night. Whether it is made of stone, wood, or glass, each of these objects tells the same story. A human desire to hold onto something sacred, to find a physical link to a past that feels almost like a dream. As we look at these vessels, we realize that the mystery isn't just in what they are made of, but in the peace and hope they have provided to everyone who has looked upon them through the centuries. As we move deeper into the quiet corners of this legend, we find ourselves moving away from physical objects and toward a secret carried in the very veins of history. This is perhaps the most whispered mystery of all, the theory of the sang-real. The idea begins with a simple shift in language, a quiet realization that the old words, sang-real, which we have long called the Holy Grail, might have been a subtle mistranslation of sang-real, meaning royal blood. In this light, the search for a cup is actually a search for a family. This mystery suggests that the Grail was never a vessel of wood or stone, but the literal bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. It is a story that follows their descendants as they moved silently through the centuries, eventually becoming the Merovingian kings of France. It makes the heart race just a little to think that a secret of such magnitude could be hidden in plain sight, tucked away in the names of kings and the dusty pages of royal genealogies. This path leads us back to the warm, sun-drenched shores of southern France, but with a different focus than before. Legends tell of a small boat, moving without oars or sails, drifting across the sea until it reached the coast of Marseille. On that boat was Mary Magdalene, and she was said to be carrying the Grail. With her, in this context, the mystery takes on a beautiful human shape. She herself is seen as the vessel, the living cup that carried the sacred lineage into a new land. She did not seek out palaces or power, but instead chose a life of quiet reflection. The story follows her to a high, lonely mountain cave called La Sainte-Baume. It is a place of cool air and heavy silence, where she reportedly spent the rest of her days guarding the truth she carried. Even today, the climb to that cave feels like a pilgrimage into the past. The idea that a person could be the Grail, a living, breathing carrier of a divine secret, changes everything we thought we knew. It turns the quest from a search for a treasure into a search for our own connection to the past. It suggests that the mystery isn't hidden in a vault or under a stone, but is something that has been alive and moving through the world, as natural and quiet as the breath in our lungs, for over 2,000 years. As we move toward the final edges of our map, we find that the search for the Grail did not stop in the Middle Ages. It simply moved into the stones of our buildings and the soil of distant lands, becoming a series of modern myths that still pull at the imagination. These are the places where people believe the mystery finally came to rest, waiting in the deep, cool dark for someone with the right eyes to see it. One of the most silent and beautiful of these places is Roz-lin Chapel, tucked away in the green, rolling landscape of Scotland. When you step inside, the air feels different, heavy with the scent of old stone and the weight of 1,000 secrets. Every inch of the chapel is covered in intricate carvings, but the heart of the mystery is the apprentice pillar. It is a masterpiece of masonry, wrapped in stone vines that seem almost to breathe. Some researchers have spent decades studying these carvings, believing they aren't just art, but a coded map or even a musical frequency that, when played correctly, might open a secret door. They whisper that the Holy Grail itself might be entombed within that very pillar, or perhaps hidden in a sealed vault deep beneath the floor, guarded by the silent stone for 600 years. It is a place that feels as if it is constantly trying to tell you something, but only in a whisper that you can't quite catch. From the stone halls of Scotland, the legend drifts back south to the town of Glastonbury, a place often identified as the legendary Isle of Avalon. Rising above the town is the Tor, a high, lonely hill that seems to touch the sky. Beneath this hill, there is a natural spring known as the Chalice Well. The water here runs a deep, rusty red because of the iron in the earth, but the local legends tell a much older story. They say the water runs red because the Holy Grail was buried deep within the earth at that very spot by Joseph of Arimathea. As the water flows over the stones, it creates a soft, bubbling sound that has lulled travelers to sleep for centuries. People still come to sit by the well, listening to the water and feeling the ancient peace of the garden. Here, the Grail isn't a treasure to be fought over. It is a quiet presence in the soil and the stream, a part of the landscape's soul. But the mystery doesn't just stay in Europe. It has a way of traveling across the vast, dark oceans. In Nova Scotia, Canada, there is a small, wooded island known as Oak Island, home to a mysterious shaft called the Money Pit. For over 200 years, people have tried to reach the bottom of this pit, only to be stopped by elaborate, ancient booby traps that flood the shaft with seawater. One of the most intriguing theories is that the Knights Templar, fleeing from Europe, traveled across the Atlantic to hide the Grail here, in a place where no king could ever reach it. The thought of those knights, tired and weathered, digging deep into the earth of a new world to protect their sacred cargo, is a powerful image. It reminds us that the Grail is a treasure that people will go to the ends of the earth to keep safe. However, not every search for the Grail has been born of peace and protection. There is a much darker chapter in this lore that took place during the 1930s. A man named Otto Rahn, working for the Nazi leadership, became obsessed with finding the Grail in southern France. He saw the relic not as a source of spiritual healing, but as a physical object of occult power that could grant his leader's dominance over the world. He spent his days wandering through the caves of the Pyrenees and the ruins of old fortresses, searching for the great treasure of the Cathars we spoke of earlier. His story ended in a mysterious death, and the secret expeditions of the Ahnenerbe remain a shadow over the history of the Grail. It is a somber reminder that when we seek the Grail for the wrong reasons, for power or for greed, the mystery seems to pull further away, retreating into the mist where it can remain pure. Now, as the world grows quiet around us, we realize that the Holy Grail is more than just a cup, a stone, or a bloodline. It is a reflection of the human heart. It is the thing we are all searching for, that sense of peace, of healing, and of connection to something much older and larger than ourselves. Whether it sits in a golden cathedral in Spain, lies hidden in a Scottish pillar, or waits in the red waters of a Glastonbury spring, the Grail remains the ultimate mystery. It is a story that has no end, only a long, meandering middle that we are all a part of. As you drift off to sleep or continue your quiet work, let the mystery of the Grail be a gentle companion, a reminder that there is still magic and wonder hidden in the quiet places of the world. To truly understand where the Holy Grail was last seen, we have to look through the eyes of the travelers and guardians who lived long before our time. While there are many stories of the Grail appearing in dreams or poems, there are a few moments in history where people claim to have stood in its presence, touching its surface or watching it move through the shadows of war. One of the most famous, last sightings, in the Holy Land takes us back over 1,300 years. In the year 670, a Frankish bishop named Arculf was traveling through the dusty, sun-bleached streets of Jerusalem. He was a man who had seen many wonders, but in a small church located between two great basilicas, he claimed to have found the very cup of the Last Supper. Arculf described the vessel in a way that feels very real and grounded. He didn't speak of a glowing, magical object from a storybook. Instead, he described a simple silver cup with two small handles, one on each side. He said it was kept in a chest, and that the people of the city would come in silence to touch it and kiss the rim. This is often considered the last documented eyewitness account of a cup in Jerusalem that was officially venerated as the vessel of Christ. After the city changed hands in the centuries that followed, that silver cup seemed to vanish from the records, leaving behind only the memory of Arculf's quiet visit. But as one story fades, another begins to take shape in the hills of Spain. If you believe the tradition of the Santo Calles, the last place the Grail was recorded is actually right where it sits today, in the Cathedral of Valencia. However, its journey to that glass case was filled with moments of high tension and long periods of hiding. The cup was reportedly last seen in Rome in the year 258. At that time, the Emperor Valerian was hunting down the leaders of the church. A young deacon named Lawrence was given the task of protecting the church's treasures. Sensing that his own time was short, Lawrence gave the cup to a trusted friend and sent it far away, across the mountains to his family home in Huesca, Spain. For hundreds of years after that, the relic lived a life of shadow. It was seen only by the monks in the high, cold monasteries of the Pyrenees, who moved it from cave to keep it safe from invading armies. There is a much more modern, last hidden moment that feels like something out of a film. During the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s, the Grail was in great danger. Just hours before the cathedral in Valencia was attacked, a group of guardians realized they had to act. In the middle of the night, a woman named Sabina Sui hid the sacred cup under her cloak and slipped out into the dark streets. For several years, the most famous relic in the world was hidden in the most ordinary places. It was tucked away inside a wardrobe in a small house, and later it was hidden behind a false wall in a tiny village called Carlet. The neighbors had no idea that just a few feet away, behind a pile of old stones and plaster, sat the object that kings and knights had died to find. It wasn't until 1939, when the conflict finally settled, that the cup was brought back out into the light. When we think about these recorded sightings, we realize that the last time the Grail was seen is often a moment of transition. It is the silver cup in Arculf's hands before Jerusalem changed forever, or it is the red agate cup being hurried through a back alley in Valencia while the world was at war. These moments remind us that the Grail is not just a relic of the ancient past, but a living part of our history that people have risked everything to see and to save. As you think about that woman walking through the dark with the cup hidden in her clothes, or the monk Arculf standing in the cool silence of a Jerusalem church, you can feel the weight of those 2,000 years. The Grail is still there, resting behind its glass in Spain, waiting for the next person to walk up and look at it with the same sense of wonder that travelers felt over 1,000 years ago. As we move through the quiet corridors of time, we find that some of the most startling discoveries do not happen in dusty libraries, but deep within the stone heart of the world. One of the most incredible stories of our modern age unfolded as recently as late 2024, in a place that has long captured the imagination of travelers and seekers alike. For decades, the world has looked at the towering, rose-red facade of the treasury in Petra, Jordan. Its massive pillars and intricate carvings, hewn directly into the sandstone cliffs, have always felt like a doorway to another world. Many of us grew up watching films where this very location served as the final resting place of the Grail, and we assumed that the magic of that story was purely fictional. But in October of that year, reality began to mirror fiction in a way that felt almost scripted. Archaeologists, using advanced remote sensing technology that can peer through solid rock, discovered something that had been missed for centuries. There was a secret tomb buried directly beneath the floor of the treasury, hidden under the feet of the millions of tourists who had walked there over the years. When the team finally excavated the site, they didn't find the hordes of gold or glittering jewels one might expect in a royal tomb. Instead, they found something far more somber and evocative. Inside the chamber lay the remains of 12 individuals who had been resting in the heavy silence of the desert for 2,000 years. The air in that tomb was old, a breath from the 1st century that had been trapped in the stone. But it was what one of those ancient individuals was holding that caused a ripple of excitement to move through the world of mystery. Among the skeletons, one was found clutching a small ceramic vessel. The sight was enough to make even the most skeptical researcher pause. In the dim light of the excavation, the cup looked remarkably like the modest, humble chalice we have often imagined, the cup of a carpenter. For a few brief moments, It felt as though the legends were coming true right before our eyes. While researchers eventually identified the object as a 1st-century Nabatean juglet, the discovery served as a powerful reminder of why we keep searching. The timing and the location of the find have reignited the legend of the Grail in a way that feels fresh and vital. It tells us that even the most famous landmarks in the world, places we think we know every inch of, are still hiding secrets right beneath our feet. It brings a certain peace to the mind to think that the desert still has secrets to give up. The image of those 12 guardians resting in the dark, with one holding a simple clay cup, connects us back to the very beginning of our story, to that quiet room in Jerusalem and the idea that the greatest power often resides in the most humble objects. As the winds blow through the canyons of Petra tonight, the mystery of what else might be hidden in the stone remains, a soft whisper in the dark. Our journey leads us back to the quiet, sun-drenched streets of Spain, but away from the famous cathedrals of the coast and into the heart of the city of Leon. This is where another modern mystery has taken root, one that feels less like a legend and more like a piece of patient, historical detective work. It centers on an object that had been hiding in plain sight for nearly 1,000 years. In 2014, 2 historians released a book titled Kings of the Grail. They had spent 3 years following a trail of whispers and old ink, and their search led them to a stunning conclusion. Inside the Basilica of San Isidoro, there is a magnificent, jewel-encrusted medieval vessel known as the Chalice of Dona Urraca. For centuries, people admired the gold, the pearls, and the emeralds that covered its surface. But the historians realized that the true treasure was not the gold on the outside, but the simple onyx cup that the gold was built to protect. The breakthrough for this mystery didn't happen in Spain, but in a quiet, dusty library in Cairo. There, 2 medieval Egyptian scrolls were discovered that had been forgotten by time. These scrolls told a story of a community of early Christians in Jerusalem who believed, with all their hearts, that they possessed the true cup used by Jesus. The documents describe how, in the 11th century, the cup was sent as a gift of gratitude to an emir in Spain who had provided aid during a famine. It was a gesture of peace and thanks, a sacred object traveling across the sea to find a new home. When scientists were finally allowed to examine the onyx cup hidden inside the gold casing, the results were startling. The stone was dated to a period between 200 years before the Common Era and 100 years after. This means the cup is exactly the right age to have been on that table in the upper room. It is a piece of history that fits perfectly into the timeline of the legend. Today, the Basilica in Leon has become a place of deep, quiet pilgrimage. People stand before the glass case, looking at the dark, polished onyx, and they feel a connection to a moment in time 2,000 years ago. It is a mystery that reminds us that sometimes, the most important things are not lost in deep caves or buried in the earth. Sometimes they are right in front of us, wrapped in layers of gold and tradition, waiting for someone to look closely enough to see the truth. As the bells of Leon ring out over the city, the cup remains in its stone home, a silent witness to the enduring power of faith and the persistence of history. As we move toward the final chapter of our evening, we find that the spirit of the Grail has drifted away from the dry sands of the desert and the stone floors of ancient chapels. It has found a new home in the deep, crushing silence of the sea. In the world of archaeology, the term, Holy Grail, is often used to describe the most elusive and valuable find in a specific field, the one object or place that seems impossible to reach, yet impossible to forget. Currently, that title belongs to the San Jose Galleon, a shipwreck resting off the coast of Colombia, wrapped in the cold embrace of the ocean floor. In 2025, a year of great anticipation and quiet preparation, the Colombian government began the delicate process of recovering artifacts from this 300-year-old vessel. To many, the San Jose is more than just a ship. It is a ghost of the Spanish Empire, a wooden fortress that carried the wealth of a continent within its hull. It is estimated to hold a treasure worth $17 billion, a number so large it feels almost like a fable. But while the treasure is measured in gold, silver, and emeralds, the story of the San Jose carries the same weight of mystery and obsession as the sacred cup itself. To understand the mystery, we must travel back in time to the year 1708. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and salt as the San Jose engaged in a fierce battle with the British Navy. In a sudden catastrophic moment, the ship's powder magazines ignited, and the great galleon was swallowed by the Caribbean Sea in a matter of minutes. It took with it 600 souls and a cargo of treasures that had been gathered from every corner of the New World. For 3 centuries, its location was one of the greatest secrets of the deep. It sat in the darkness, miles below the surface, where the light of the sun could never reach. The search for the San Jose was a quest that spanned generations. Treasure hunters and historians alike spoke of it in hushed tones, wondering if the ocean would ever give up its most precious secret. Now that it has been found, the recovery efforts are being treated with a level of reverence and secrecy that mirrors the ancient quests of the knights. Every piece of wood and every tarnished coin is handled with the utmost care, as if the researchers are touching a piece of a lost world. There is a strange, quiet beauty in the image of this ship resting on the seabed. It is surrounded by a forest of coral and the slow, rhythmic movements of the deep-sea currents. Even though it is not a religious relic, the San Jose represents our collective human desire to find what has been lost to time. It represents the hope that even after 300 years of silence, the things we have lost can be found again. As we reflect on this maritime mystery, we see how the idea of the Grail has evolved. It is no longer just a vessel from a meal in Jerusalem. It is the gold at the bottom of the sea, the secret tomb in the desert, and the hidden parchment in a library. It is the ultimate find. That keeps us looking, keeps us questioning, and keeps us dreaming of what lies just beyond our reach. The San Jose, with its $17 billion in emeralds and gold, is a modern testament to the fact that the world is still full of wonders waiting to be discovered. As the waves roll gently over the site of the wreck tonight, we can find comfort in the thought that some treasures are protected by the earth and the sea until we are ready to find them. The story of the San Jose is a reminder that the quest never truly ends. It only changes its shape, leading us from the mountaintops to the deepest trenches of the ocean. As our journey through the history of the Grail leads us into the modern era, we find ourselves standing once again before the weathered stone of Roz-lin Chapel in Scotland. This building has long been a centerpiece of our mystery, a treasure in stone, where many believe the Knights Templar hid their most sacred relics within ornate pillars or beneath the heavy floorboards. But in the last 5 years, the air around Roz-lin has changed. The search is no longer just about flickering candles and ancient maps. It has entered the digital age. The chapel has recently undergone a massive digital transformation, as if the building itself is being translated into a new language. Researchers have used 3-dimensional terrestrial laser scanning to document every single square inch of the structure, both inside and out. Imagine a machine that can see, with billions of tiny points of light, capturing the curve of every leaf and the depth of every shadow with more precision than any human eye could ever manage. This high-tech survey has revealed carvings that were previously invisible, hidden by centuries of dust, or worn away by the soft touch of thousands of visitors. This technology has allowed experts to look inside the stone structures without ever having to lift a hammer or disturb the quiet of the sanctuary. It is a non-destructive way of questioning the past. While no physical cup has been found sitting on a shelf yet, the scans have revealed something that has sent a shiver of excitement through the community of seekers. Deep beneath the 15th century walls, the digital survey has detected a complex series of underground vaults and tunnels that remain entirely unexplored. These hidden chambers are like a heartbeat beneath the stone. For now, they remain out of reach, protected by the chapel's status as a sacred monument and the need to preserve its ancient foundations. But the mystery of Roz-lin has shifted. It is no longer just a matter of old legends and what-ifs. It is now a matter of what the next generation of ground-penetrating radar might find when it peers into those dark, silent spaces. As we think about those digital maps, ghostly, blue-lit versions of the chapel's interior, we realize that the Grail search is still very much alive. It has simply moved from the world of the physical into the world of light and data. The thought of those tunnels, sitting in the absolute darkness beneath the feet of the tourists, is a reminder that we are always walking on top of secrets. The Grail may be closer than we think, waiting for the technology of the future to finally whisper its location to the world. As our journey moves toward its end, we find that not all discoveries are about finding something new. Some of the most touching moments in the story of the Grail are about the quiet end of old certainties. For a long time, the Nantio's Cup in Wales was one of the most beloved and plausible candidates for the Holy Grail. It wasn't a glittering prize of gold or jewels, but a simple, cracked, and weathered wooden bowl. Believers spoke of it in hushed, respectful tones, telling of how Joseph of Arimathea had brought it to the shores of Britain, and how it had been guarded by monks at the Abbey of Strata, Florida, before finding its way to the Nantio's mansion. For centuries, people traveled from far and wide just to touch its surface or drink water that had rested within it, reporting miraculous healings that defied explanation. However, as we have seen with so many mysteries, the 21st century brought with it the cold, clear light of scientific analysis. Recent studies, including wood analysis and carbon dating, have cast a long shadow over the ancient claims. Experts have identified the wood not as olive from the Middle East, but as wych elm, a tree native to Europe. The dating suggests the cup was actually crafted in the 14th or 15th century, the late Middle Ages. This would mean it was made over 1,300 years after the events of the New Testament. To some, this might feel like a disappointment, a moment where the magic of the legend fades away. But in the cozy, spooky world of the unknown, this revelation actually adds a beautiful new layer to the story. It shows us that the power of the Grail isn't just in its age or its origin, it is in the human spirit. For hundreds of years, this simple piece of wood was made holy by the collective faith, hope, and belief of the thousands of people who sought it out. It became a vessel for their prayers and their desire for healing. Even if it was carved by a medieval monk rather than held by a disciple, the peace it brought to those who held it was very real. The Nantio's Cup now rests in the National Library of Wales, where it is kept in a climate-controlled case to protect what remains of its fragile frame. It is a quiet survivor of a different kind of quest. It reminds us that even when our old stories are corrected by science, the wonder remains. The Grail, it seems, is less about a physical object and more about the way we look at the world, searching for a spark of the divine in the most humble of places. As the lights dim in the library and the world outside grows still, the cup sits in the dark, a testament to centuries of human belief that refuses to fade, even as the wood itself grows old and tired. As we move further away from the familiar paths of wood and pottery, our journey takes a turn toward the stars. In this modern age, a new group of researchers is looking back at the oldest poems with fresh eyes, moving away from the idea of a cup and returning to a much stranger, more celestial description. They are focusing on the medieval term lapis exilis, the stone from heaven, that we touched on earlier in our story. This is a theory that bridges the gap between ancient myth and modern science, blending the world of geology with the vast mysteries of astronomy. The growing belief among alternative historians is that the Holy Grail was never an object made by human hands, but was actually a meteorite. This perspective shifts the entire quest from a search for a piece of pottery to a search for a fragment of the cosmos. When you look at the legend through this lens, many of the more magical descriptions begin to make a different kind of sense. In the old stories, the Grail was often said to provide its own light, glowing with an intensity that outshone the candles in a hall. It was said to provide sustenance and to keep those who guarded it from aging. To an ancient person, a stone falling from the sky in a streak of fire would have been the ultimate divine gift. It would have felt like a living piece of the heavens, a physical connection to the gods. The Lapis Exilis theory suggests that this starstone was the true treasure kept by the Cathars in their mountain fortresses or protected by the Knights Templar in the dark vaults of Jerusalem. It explains why the object was often described as being kept in a vessel or a reliquary, not because it was a cup, but because it was a powerful, otherworldly stone that needed to be shielded. There is a deep, quiet wonder in the thought that the Grail might be a piece of the universe that traveled for millions of miles through the cold silence of space before landing on our Earth. It connects the spiritual quest of the Knights to the modern human desire to understand the stars. If the Grail is a meteorite, then the quest is no longer just about finding a relic of the past. It is about finding our place in a much larger, infinite story. As we look up at the night sky tonight, we can imagine that same stone, glowing and silent, resting somewhere in a hidden cave or a forgotten cellar, still holding the cold, ancient secrets of the stars within its iron heart. It is a mystery that reminds us that the earth and the heavens are not as far apart as we might think. As we draw our long journey to a close, we find ourselves back in the present, standing at the edge of the 21st century. The story of the Holy Grail remains alive not because we have found a definitive answer, but because it acts as a mirror for whatever we are seeking in our own lives. In this modern age, the Grail has become the quiet intersection where our ancient, dusty past meets our bright, technological future. Whether it is a simple ceramic juglet discovered in the silent, red rock tombs of Petra, or a ghostly digital scan revealing hidden chambers behind the walls of a Scottish chapel, the quest continues to evolve. It adapts to our tools and our changing beliefs. When we needed a symbol of faith, the Grail was a humble wooden cup. When we sought adventure and chivalry, it became a glowing vessel in a king's hall. And now, as we peer into the depths of the ocean or the microscopic structure of an onyx bowl, it has become a puzzle for our scientists and historians to solve. But at its heart, the mystery of the Grail is about the human need for connection. We want to believe that there is a thread, made of wood, stone, or even blood, that ties us back to the moments that shaped our world. The quest is a reminder that we are part of a long, meandering story that began in a small room in Jerusalem and has traveled across continents and through the stars. The search for the Grail is, and perhaps always will be, a cozy, spooky endeavor. It is the feeling of sitting by a warm fire while the wind whispers secrets against the window pane. It is the comfort of knowing that there are still mysteries left to solve and treasures left to find, tucked away in the quiet corners of the earth where the light doesn't quite reach. As we end our reflection tonight, we can rest easy in the knowledge that the Grail is never truly lost. It is simply waiting for the next generation to go looking for it. As you settle in for another long, quiet journey into the unknown, let the modern world outside your window grow still. Tonight, we are not looking at dusty scrolls from centuries ago, but at the very edges of our own time. In the years 2024 and 2025, the legend of the Holy Grail has taken a surprising and very physical turn. It seems the Earth is finally ready to reveal secrets that have been tucked away in the dark for over 2,000 years. The most startling chapter of this modern quest unfolded in the autumn of 2024, in the rose-red city of Petra, Jordan. For generations, we have looked at the towering facade of the treasury and thought of it as a beautiful, empty shell, a monument to the past. But beneath the feet of the millions of travelers who have walked those sandy paths, a secret was waiting. Using advanced ground-penetrating radar, a team of researchers peered through the solid rock floor and discovered a hidden tomb that had been lost to time. When the stone was finally moved, the air of the first century spilled out into the modern world. Inside, they found the remains of 12 individuals who had been resting in the absolute silence of the desert for 2 millennia. But it was what one of these ancient guardians held in their hands that made the world catch its breath. One skeleton was found clutching a small, simple ceramic vessel. In the dim light of the tomb, the cup looked remarkably like the humble chalice we have always imagined the Grail to be. While later analysis in 2025 identified it as a 1st century Nabatean juglet, the discovery felt like a whisper from the past. It reminded us that the locations we see in our stories are often built on very real, very deep mysteries. As we move from the desert sands to the stone cathedrals of Spain, the modern-day quest continues with the Grail of Leon. In 2025, new technology has allowed us to look closer than ever before at the chalice of Dona Urraca. This isn't just a story of gold and jewels, but a piece of historical detective work that began in a forgotten library in Cairo. Medieval scrolls found there speak of a community in Jerusalem who believed they held the true cup of the Last Supper, eventually sending it to Spain for safekeeping in the 11th century. Scientific dating has now confirmed that the onyx cup hidden inside the gold casing is exactly the right age, crafted around the time of the 1st century. It is a quiet, powerful realization that a physical link to that night in Jerusalem might be sitting right in front of us, protected by layers of tradition. Even in the holy city of Jerusalem itself, the year 2025 has been one of incredible revelation. Archaeologists working deep beneath the Temple Mount and in the city of David have uncovered new tunnels and monumental structures that prove the ancient city was far more complex than we ever knew. Each stone moved and each new chamber found adds a piece to the puzzle of where a sacred relic could have been hidden during times of war. We are no longer just guessing where the shadows lead. We are mapping them with lasers and light. The search for the Holy Grail in the 21st century is a beautiful blend of the old and the new. It is the feeling of an ancient ceramic cup in a dark tomb combined with the glow of a digital scan. It reminds us that even in our world of satellites and screens, there is still room for wonder. The Grail remains a symbol of our desire to find the truth, tucked away in the places we least expect. As we end our look at these latest findings, we can rest easy knowing that the mystery is still very much alive, and the Earth is still full of secrets waiting for the right moment to be found. There is a certain kind of silence that exists in old cathedrals and ancient libraries. It is a heavy, dusty silence that feels like it is holding its breath, waiting for someone to notice a secret hidden in plain sight. For over 800 years, the world has been obsessed with a single object, a vessel that supposedly held the light of the divine. We call it the Holy Grail. But when we ask if the reports of its location are true, we first have to ask what we are actually looking for. In the beginning, the stories did not even agree on what the Grail was. Some said it was a dish, others a stone that fell from the stars, and others still believed it was a cup used during a final, quiet meal in an upper room in Jerusalem. The report that most people think of today, the idea of a simple chalice used by Jesus and later used to collect his blood. did not actually appear in writing until the late 12th century. It was a poet named Robert de Boron who first solidified this image. Before him, the Grail was a nebulous, shifting thing, a symbol of something unattainable. If we look at the historical reports, we find ourselves standing in a landscape filled with over 200 different candidates across Europe and the Middle East. Each one has a story. Each one has a group of people who would swear on their lives that their relic is the true one. But science and archaeology have a way of whispering a different truth in the dark. Many of these objects, when brought into the light of modern testing, turn out to be something else entirely. They are beautiful, yes. They are ancient, certainly. But they are often centuries too young to have been on that table in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. However, there are a few reports that refuse to be easily dismissed. There are objects that have survived wars, plagues, and the rise and fall of empires, carrying with them a provenance that makes even the most cynical historian pause. Tonight, we will walk through the halls where these relics are kept. We will look at the red stones of Spain, the crumbling wood of Wales, and the silver of the East. We will try to find the thin thread of truth that connects the myth to the reality. Lean back, get comfortable, and let the fire burn low as we begin our search for the whereabouts of the Holy Grail. If you were to travel to the city of Valencia in Spain, you would find yourself standing before a magnificent cathedral. Inside a small, quiet chapel, protected by thick glass and the hushed prayers of pilgrims, sits the Santo Cáliz, the holy chalice of Valencia. Of all the reports regarding the whereabouts of the Grail, this is perhaps the one that carries the most weight in the eyes of both the church and archaeology. The chalice itself is a strange, composite object. It is made of 3 distinct parts. The base and the handles are ornate gold, decorated with pearls and emeralds, clearly the work of medieval craftsmen from the 14th century. But it is the top part, the cup itself, that holds the mystery. It is a small, simple bowl carved from a deep, reddish-brown stone called Oriental agate. In the 1960s, a professor named Antonio Beltran conducted a detailed archaeological study of this agate cup. He found something startling. The style of the carving, the material used, and the way the stone was polished all pointed to a specific time and place. The 1st century before Christ, or the 1st century after his birth. It was likely made in a workshop in either Egypt or Syria. This means that, unlike almost every other Grail in existence, the Valencia cup is actually old enough to have been in Jerusalem during the time of Jesus. The report of its journey to Spain is a long, winding tale. Tradition says that St. Peter took the cup with him to Rome when he went to lead the early church. It stayed in Rome for over 200 years, used by the early popes in their secret ceremonies in the catacombs. But in the year 258, during the persecutions of the Emperor Valerian, the Roman authorities were hunting for the treasures of the church. The Pope at the time, Sixtus II, knew his time was short. He entrusted the cup to a young deacon named Lawrence. Just days before he was martyred, Lawrence supposedly sent the cup away to his home in Spain for safekeeping. From there, it was hidden in the rugged mountains of Aragon, moving from monastery to monastery as the centuries turned. It finally found its home in Valencia in 1437. Is this report true? It is impossible to say with absolute certainty. We have no written records from the first 3 centuries that mention the cup by name. But the physical evidence of the stone itself remains a powerful, silent witness. It is a vessel of the right age, the right material, and from the right part of the world. For many, that is as close to the truth as we will ever get. For a long time, Valencia held the title of the most likely home of the Grail. But in the year 2014, a new report surfaced that shook the foundations of that belief. 2 historians, Margarita Torres and José Miguel Ortega del Rio, published a book that claimed the real Grail was actually sitting in the Basilica of San Isidoro in the city of Leon, Spain. This object is known as the Chalice of Dona Urraca. Like the Valencia chalice, it is a composite. On the outside, it is covered in gold and jewels, but hidden inside are two small bowls made of onyx. The historians found a pair of ancient Egyptian scrolls in a library in Cairo that told a fascinating story. According to these documents, the chalice used by Christ was stolen from Jerusalem and taken to Cairo by a Muslim community. In the 11th century, there was a great famine in Egypt. The Emir of Denia, a ruler on the Spanish coast, sent a massive shipment of grain to help the starving people of Cairo. In return, the Caliph of Egypt supposedly gave him the most precious thing he possessed, the cup of Christ. The emir then gifted the cup to King Ferdinand I of Leon as a peace offering. The historians argue that the gold casing was added later by Ferdinand's daughter, Urraca, to protect and honor the humble stone bowls inside. When researchers examined the onyx, they found that it too dated back to the 1st century. The report was so compelling that the basilica had to be closed to the public for a short time because so many people flocked to see it. This leaves us with a strange puzzle. Two different cups in two different Spanish cities, both with archaeological evidence linking them to the right era. It reminds us that history is often written by the victors and the survivors, and sometimes two truths can exist in the same space. Or perhaps the truth is that neither is the Grail, and the stories grew around them because humans have a deep, soul-level need to touch something that once touched the divine. While Spain has its stone chalices, the hills of Wales hold a different kind of mystery. For generations, people have whispered about the Nanteo's cup. This is not a jeweled masterpiece or a finely carved agate bowl. It is a small, battered fragment of wood, a dark, unassuming olive-wood bowl that was once kept in a grand manor house called Nanteo's Mansion. The report associated with this cup is one of survival and healing. Legend says that Joseph of Arimathea brought the Grail to Britain, eventually hiding it at Glastonbury Abbey. When the monasteries were dissolved by King Henry VIII in the 16th century, 7 monks supposedly fled with the cup, seeking refuge in the remote hills of Wales. They eventually arrived at the Nanteo's estate, where they remained until the last of them died, leaving the cup in the care of the family who lived there. For hundreds of years, the Nanteo's cup was famous for its supposed healing powers. People would travel for miles to drink water from the bowl, hoping for a miracle. The wood was so worn down by the touch of thousands of lips that only a fragment of it remains today. However, science eventually came to Nanteo's. In the 20th century, the cup was examined by experts and subjected to dating. The results were a cold splash of water on a warm legend. The cup was not made of olive wood from the Holy Land. It was carved from wych elm, a tree native to Europe. More importantly, it was dated to the 14th century. It was not the cup of Christ. It was a medieval mazer, a common type of drinking bowl used in the Middle Ages. The report of the Nanteo's cup being the Holy Grail was not true in a historical sense, but in a spiritual sense. For the people who found hope in its presence, it was real enough. It shows us how easily a report can be born from a desire for comfort in a cold world. We must look at the possibility that the most famous reports of the Grail's whereabouts are not true because the Grail itself might be a beautiful lie. If you look at the historical record before the year 1180, you will find almost no mention of a Holy Grail. There were relics of the Passion, thorns from the crown, pieces of the cross, but the cup was not a major focus of devotion. Then came Chrétien de Troyes, a French poet. He wrote a story called Percival, the Story of the Grail. In his version, the Grail was not even a cup. It was a large, ornate serving dish. It was only in the decades that followed that other writers, like Robert de Boron and Wolfram von Eschenbach, transformed it into the chalice of the Last Supper or a mystical stone. The reports of the Knights Templar finding the Grail under the Temple Mount in Jerusalem are also largely the product of later fiction. While the Templars were certainly in Jerusalem, and they certainly became very wealthy, there is no contemporary evidence that they ever claimed to have found the cup. The connection between the Templars and the Grail was mostly popularized in the 19th and 20th centuries by writers who wanted to add a layer of occult mystery to the order. So, is the report of the Grail's existence true? It depends on what you mean by true. If you are looking for a physical object with magical powers, you are likely chasing a ghost created by medieval poets. But if the Grail is a symbol of the quest for perfection, or a metaphor for the hidden knowledge of the early church, then it is as real as anything else in our history. In more recent years, a very different kind of report about the Grail's whereabouts became a global sensation. This was the idea that the Holy Grail was not an object at all, but a bloodline. The Sang-real, or royal blood. This theory suggested that Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene and that their descendants lived on in secret, protected by a shadowy organization called the Priory of Sion. This report gained massive popularity through books like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and later the fiction of the Da Vinci Code. It was a captivating idea. The secret was not hidden in a cup, but in the very veins of a living family. It turned the search for the Grail into a detective story spanning 2,000 years. But as the spooky, cozy light of truth dawned, this report was revealed to be a modern fabrication. The documents that supposedly proved the existence of the Priory of Sion were forged in the 1950s and 60s by a Frenchman named Pierre Plantard. He planted them in the National Library of France to create a fake pedigree for himself, despite the fact that the bloodline theory has been thoroughly debunked by historians and journalists. Many people still believe it. It is a reminder that once a report is released into the world, it takes on a life of its own. It becomes part of the truth for those who want to believe in a world filled with hidden conspiracies and ancient secrets. So, we come to the end of our journey through the reports and the rumors. Was any of it true? The answer is a quiet, complicated yes. The Valencia chalice is a real object of the right age. The Leon chalice has a fascinating, documented history that leads back to Cairo. These are real things that you can see and touch. They are true, in the sense that they exist and they hold a weight of history that few other things can match. But the truth of the Holy Grail is also found in the search itself. For nearly 1,000 years, the idea of the Grail has inspired people to be better, to look deeper, and to believe that there is something sacred hidden in the world. Whether it is a stone bowl in Spain, a wooden fragment in Wales, or a poem written in France, the Grail is a mirror. We see in it what we want to find. A connection to the past, a hope for the future, or a mystery that can never be solved. The fire has burned down now, and the shadows are growing long. The world is full of things we cannot explain, and the Holy Grail is perhaps the greatest of them all. It is still out there, in a way, waiting in the silence of a chapel or the pages of an old book, keeping its secrets until someone else comes looking. When most people think of the Holy Grail, they imagine a golden cup sitting on a velvet cushion. But the truth is often much more humble and much more strange. One of the most fascinating but overlooked stories is that the Grail was never a cup at all, but a stone that fell from the stars. In the 13th century, a writer named Wolfram von Eschenbach wrote a version of the story where he called the Grail the lapis exilis, lapis exilis. This translates to a small stone, or the stone that fell from heaven. The evidence for this is not found in a museum, but in the history of alchemy. For centuries, seekers of the philosopher's stone believed that the Grail was actually a physical piece of the divine realm, a meteorite that had been carved into a vessel. The meaning behind this is beautiful. It suggests that the divine is not something we made with our hands, but something that landed in our world from somewhere far away. It reminds us that we are always looking up at the sky for answers, even when we think we are looking at the ground. Then there is the story of the Antioch chalice. This object actually exists. You can see it today in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. It was found in 1910 by some workmen digging a well near the ancient city of Antioch. For a long time, people were convinced this was the true Grail because it was a plain silver cup hidden inside a much more ornate, gilded shell. The shell is covered in carvings of vines and birds, and even figures that many believe are the apostles. While modern scientists now think it might have been an elaborate oil lamp from the 6th century, the evidence of its discovery alongside other sacred treasures makes it a compelling ghost of what the Grail might have looked like. The meaning here is about light. If the Grail was a lamp, it was meant to show us the way in the dark, to be a literal light of the world, rather than just a cup to drink from. It is a reminder that the things we search for often change their shape once we find them. If we move our gaze to the foggy hills of England, we find the Chalice Well in Glastonbury. This is a place where the earth itself seems to bleed. The water that flows from this ancient spring is a deep, rusty red. And for 2,000 years, people have whispered that it is red because the Grail was buried beneath its source. Archaeological evidence shows that this well has been used by humans for at least 2 millennia, and the iron-rich water does indeed leave a crimson stain on everything it touches. The meaning of the Glastonbury Grail is tied to the idea of the blood of the earth. It suggests that the sacred is not trapped in an object, but is part of the living world around us. It is a story about the intersection of nature and the divine, where the water we drink is a direct link to the mysteries of the past. There is another, even more unpopular theory that suggests the Grail was actually a piece of cloth. Some researchers believe that the Grail was a mistranslation of the word for the Shroud of Turin, the burial cloth of Jesus. They argue that when the medieval poets wrote about a vessel that held the blood of Christ, they were actually talking about the cloth that had wrapped his body and absorbed his wounds. This theory carries weight because the Knights Templar were known to possess a mysterious head, or image, that they worshipped in secret, which some believe was the shroud folded up to show only the face. The meaning of a cloth grail is much more intimate. It is about the touch of a person, the physical reality of suffering, and the way we try to preserve the memory of those we love. In the gardens of a grand estate in Staffordshire, there is a monument known as the Shepherd's Monument at Shugborough Hall. On this stone carving, there is a mysterious sequence of letters, O-U-O-S-V-A-V-V. Flanked by the letters D and M, this is known as the Shugborough inscription, and it has baffled code breakers for over 250 years. Even Charles Darwin and Charles Dickens supposedly tried to solve it. Many believe this code provides the coordinates or the evidence for the whereabouts of the Holy Grail. While the code remains unsolved, its presence on a monument that mirrors a famous painting about the search for the sacred suggests that the Grail is a puzzle we are meant to solve with our minds. The meaning here is intellectual. The idea that the cup is actually a state of understanding that can only be reached through deep study and reflection. Finally, we have the story of the mazer, the idea that the true Grail was just a simple wooden bowl. This is often called the Grail of the poor. In a world obsessed with gold and jewels, the idea that the most sacred object in history was made of common wood is a powerful subversion. There are fragments of wooden bowls all over Europe that claim this title, including the Nanteo's cup in Wales. While carbon dating often proves these objects are medieval rather than ancient, the evidence lies in the historical practice of the time. A carpenter's son would have used wood, not gold. The meaning of the wooden Grail is a lesson in humility. It tells us that the divine is found in the ordinary, in the things we use every day without thinking. and that we do not need riches to be worthy of a miracle. As you sit here in the quiet, think about these different versions of the truth. Maybe the Grail is a stone, a lamp, a spring, a cloth, a code, or a simple wooden bowl. Each of these stories carries its own evidence, whether it is a physical artifact or a long-standing tradition. And each one offers a different way to understand the mystery. The truth is likely hidden somewhere in between the lines, waiting for the next person to come along with a quiet heart and an open mind. There is a specific kind of scent that belongs to a very old library, a mixture of damp stone, dried leather, and the sweet, vanilla-like decay of ancient paper. It is a scent that tells you that you are standing in a place where time has decided to slow down, perhaps even to stop entirely. When we ask if the stories in the books about the Holy Grail are true, we are essentially asking if the map we have been given matches the land beneath our feet. For many people, the books of the Grail are the famous romances of the Middle Ages, the tales of King Arthur and his knights, of Percival and Galahad. But we must understand that these books were not written as history in the way we understand it today. In the 12th and 13th centuries, the line between what was real and what was meaningful was very thin, almost transparent. The very first book to mention a Grail was written around the year 1180 by a French poet named Chrétien de Troyes. His story, Percival, the Tale of the Grail, introduces us to a young, naive knight who witnesses a strange procession in a mysterious castle. In this book, the Grail is not a cup. It is described as a Grail, a large, shallow serving dish, the kind used to serve a great fish or a lavish meal. It was made of pure gold and encrusted with the most precious gems the poet could imagine. So is this story true? If we are looking for a historical document, the answer is no. Chrétien was a poet, a master of fiction who was writing for the amusement of the court of Marie de Champagne. He was creating a world of chivalry and spiritual testing. But truth has many layers. While the characters may have been inventions, the Grail he described likely drew from much older, half-remembered stories from the Celtic world. Tales of magical cauldrons that could feed an entire army or bring the dead back to life. These were the hidden documents of the oral tradition, passed down through whispers and songs long before they were ever committed to parchment. As we move deeper into the library of the Grail, we find the work of Robert de Boron, written just a few decades after Chrétien. It is in his book, Joseph of Arimathea, that the Grail undergoes a profound transformation. It is no longer a serving dish. It becomes the cup used by Jesus at the Last Supper, the vessel that Joseph used to catch the blood of the Savior as he hung upon the cross. This is the moment when the literary fiction began to merge with religious devotion. Is this report true? Again, there is no historical evidence from the 1st century that such a cup was preserved as a relic in the way Robert describes. The early church fathers who wrote extensively about the items of the Passion never mentioned a cup. They spoke of the cross, the thorns, and the nails. But the cup remained silent in the records of history for over 1,000 years. But does that mean the books are false? Not necessarily. They are true, in the sense that they reflect the spiritual landscape of the Middle Ages. They show us a world that was desperately searching for a physical connection to the divine. The knights in the books were not just looking for a piece of gold. They were looking for a way to heal a broken world. The truth of these books lies in the quest itself, in the human desire to find something sacred in the midst of a dark and violent age. Yet even as we acknowledge the fiction of the poets, we cannot ignore the whispers of the hidden documents, the scrolls and parchments that were never meant for public eyes. There are records in the archives of ancient monasteries that speak of strange objects brought back from the Crusades. There are letters from kings and bishops that hint at a secret knowledge, a treasure, that was too dangerous to be named openly. As we sit here, surrounded by the ghosts of these old stories, we must prepare ourselves to look deeper. We must look past the gold and the jewels of the poets and find the cold, hard reality of the manuscripts that history tried to forget. The story is only just beginning, and the shadows in this library have many more secrets to tell. If we leave the world of poetry and enter the world of archaeology, we find that sometimes the hidden documents people dream of actually come to light. In the year 2014, two researchers in Spain, Margarita Torres and José Miguel Ortega del Rio, made a discovery that changed everything we thought we knew about the physical whereabouts of the Grail. They were not looking for the Grail at all. They were studying Islamic art in the Basilica of San Isidoro in the city of Leon. But while they were investigating the history of a beautiful jeweled chalice known as the Cup of Dona Urraca, they came across a report of two ancient scrolls that had been found in the Al-Azhar University in Cairo. These scrolls were not fiction. They were historical documents, written in Arabic, dating back to the 11th century. They told a story that was so detailed and so specific that it forced historians to reconsider the entire legend. According to these hidden documents, the Cup of Christ had been preserved in Jerusalem by the early Christian community. It was eventually stolen during a period of unrest and taken to Egypt. The scrolls describe how the Caliph of Egypt, during a time of terrible famine, received a massive gift of grain from the ruler of Dinaya, a small kingdom on the eastern coast of Spain. As a gesture of immense gratitude, the Caliph sent the most precious relic in his possession to the Spanish king, the cup that had been used in the upper room in Jerusalem. The documents go even further. They describe a small piece of the cup that had been chipped off with a knife. When the researchers in Spain examined the onyx bowl hidden inside the gold casing of the Dona Urraca chalice, they found a small, jagged chip missing from the rim, exactly as the Cairo scrolls had described nearly 1,000 years earlier. This is a different kind of truth. It is the truth of provenance. It suggests that while the Arthurian books were being written in France, a real, physical object with a documented history was moving silently across the Mediterranean. The hidden documents in Cairo provided the missing link between the myth and the reality. They showed that the story of the Grail was not just a product of the imagination, but was rooted in the movement of people, the exchange of grain for gold, and the long-forgotten diplomatic ties between the Islamic and Christian worlds. But why was this kept hidden for so long? The answer lies in the nature of relics. In the Middle Ages, a relic was more than just a piece of history. It was a source of power, prestige, and immense wealth for the church or the king who possessed it. If the king of Leon had announced that he possessed the true Holy Grail, he would have invited the envy of every other ruler in Europe. He would have turned his kingdom into a target for both pilgrims and pillagers. So the truth was hidden in plain sight. The simple onyx bowl was encased in gold and jewels, transformed into a beautiful piece of church treasure that looked like any other. The secret of its origin was buried in the archives of a university thousands of miles away, written in a language that few in Leon could read. It makes one wonder what other documents are currently resting in the dark, waiting for a researcher to look at them with fresh eyes. History is not a closed book. It is a series of layers, and we have only just begun to peel them back. The story of the Leon chalice reminds us that the hidden documents of the Grail are often right in front of us, disguised as something ordinary, waiting for the light of truth to find them. When we speak of hidden documents, our minds inevitably turn toward the city of Rome, specifically to the Vatican Apostolic Archive. This is a place of endless shelving, stretching for over 50 miles underground, filled with the secrets of the last 2,000 years. For centuries, people have whispered that the true story of the Holy Grail is kept in a locked box within these vaults, protected by a silence that no outsider can break. For a long time, the Vatican archives were closed to the world. It was only in the late 19th century that scholars were granted limited access. And in the year 2001, a researcher named Barbara Frail found a document that many believed had been lost forever, the Chinon parchment. While this document does not mention the Holy Grail by name, it deals with the people most closely associated with its mystery, the Knights Templar. For hundreds of years, the truth about the Templars was that they were heretics who had turned away from the Church, leading to their brutal suppression in the early 14th century. The stories in the books said that they had found the Grail in Jerusalem and that their secret knowledge was what led to their downfall. The Chinon parchment, however, revealed a very different story. It was a record of the trial of the Templars, and it showed that Pope Clement V had actually found the order innocent of heresy. He had wanted to reform them, not destroy them. But the document had been misplaced in the archives for 700 years, hidden away while the official history books told a story of guilt and execution. This discovery teaches us a vital lesson about the truth of the Grail. Often the documents are not hidden because they contain magic spells or maps to buried treasure. They are hidden because they contradict the official story. They are hidden because they reveal the messy political reality behind the beautiful legends. If the Templars did find something in Jerusalem, a cup, a scroll, or a secret, the evidence of it would not be found in a book of fairy tales. It would be found in the account books, the trial minutes, and the private correspondence of the men who were there. The hidden documents of the Vatican are filled with these fragments of reality. They speak of the vast sums of money the Templars moved across Europe, the strange symbols they carved into their chapels, and the relics they guarded with their lives. But there is a deeper level to the Vatican's silence. There are documents that remain classified, papers from the more recent centuries that have not yet been opened to the public. There are reports from priests and explorers who claim to have found the Grail in the desert of Jordan or the mountains of Ethiopia. These documents are not unknown. The Church knows exactly where they are, but they are kept in the dark to avoid the chaos that would follow if the world thought the Grail had finally been found. The truth in the Vatican is a guarded truth. It is a realization that the Grail is more powerful as a mystery than it is as an object. As long as it is lost, it remains a symbol of hope. If it were ever found, it would become a piece of property, a source of conflict, and a target for the cynical. So we sit here in the cozy, spooky quiet, knowing that just a few floors beneath the feet of the Pope, there are shelves of paper that could answer our questions. We know they are there. We know they are real. But for now, they stay in the shadows, keeping their secrets until the time is right. As we continue to look for the hidden documents and the truth behind the books, we must consider a theory that is as compelling as it is unpopular. What if the books were not about a cup at all, but about a piece of cloth? There are scholars who argue that the word Grail was a mistranslation or a code. They point to the fact that in many early manuscripts the word is written as San-Greal, which can be divided in two ways. Most people read it as Sang-Real, meaning royal blood, but others believe it refers to the Sinden-Greal, the Great Shroud. The evidence for this cloth grail is hidden in the history of the Shroud of Turin. We have historical documents that show the shroud was in the possession of the Knights Templar for several decades. During their trials, some knights admitted to worshipping a mysterious head or a bearded image. For a long time, the Church said this was proof of their heresy. But if you fold the Shroud of Turin so that only the face is visible, it looks exactly like the descriptions of the Templar idol. This would mean that the hidden documents of the Grail were actually the shroud itself, a physical record of the Passion that was too sacred and too dangerous to be shown to the public. The poets of the Middle Ages, hearing rumors of a powerful relic protected by the Templars, may have transformed the cloth into a cup to make it fit into their stories of chivalry and drinking. There are unknown documents in the archives of the Savoy family in Italy that hint at this connection. For centuries, the shroud was the private property of this royal family, and their private records speak of the relic in hushed, reverent tones. They suggest that the shroud was the true source of their power, the real Grail that had survived the fires of history. If this theory is true, then the stories in the books are both true and false at the same time. They are true in their devotion to the blood of Christ, but they are false in their description of the vessel. The hidden documents are not pieces of paper, but the very fibers of a linen cloth that has been studied by scientists for decades and yet remains a mystery. Think about the meaning of this for a moment. A cup is a vessel that holds something. A cloth is something that wraps and protects. If the Grail is a cloth, it is a story about comfort and burial, a story about the end of a life and the beginning of a mystery. It is a much more human, much more fragile truth than a golden chalice. The truth of the shroud is still being written. Every few years, a new document is found in a dusty archive that sheds light on where the cloth was during the missing years of its history. These are the real hidden documents of the Grail. The trail of receipts, descriptions, and secret handovers that connect the world of the Crusades to the modern world. As we sit in the silence, we realize that the books are just the surface of the water. Beneath them, there is a deep, dark ocean of history, filled with cloth, stones, and scrolls that we are only just starting to see. We must now turn our attention to a version of the Grail that is rarely discussed in the popular books of today. The Grail as a stone. In the 13th century, the German poet Wolfram von Eschenbach wrote a book called Parzival. In his story, the Grail is not a cup and it is not a cloth. It is a stone called the lapis exilis. Wolfram claimed that he was telling the true story which he had heard from a mysterious source named Coyote the Provençal. Coyote, in turn, had supposedly found the story in a hidden document in the city of Toledo, Spain. A manuscript written in a strange, ancient language by a man named Phlegetones. According to this document, the Grail was a stone that had fallen from the stars. It was a piece of the divine realm that had landed on Earth, and it possessed the power to provide eternal youth and endless food to those who were pure of heart. This sounds like the most fantastical fiction of all, but there is a strange, hidden truth behind it. During the Middle Ages, the city of Toledo was a center of alchemical study. It was a place where Christian, Jewish, and Muslim scholars worked together to translate ancient Greek and Arabic texts. Many of these hidden documents dealt with the philosopher's stone, the legendary substance that could transform base metals into gold and grant immortality. The truth of Wolfram's book might be that the Grail was an alchemical symbol. For the alchemists, the Grail was not an object you could find in a castle. It was a state of being. It was the stone of wisdom that you had to create within yourself through study, meditation, and the purification of the soul. There are thousands of unknown alchemical manuscripts in the libraries of Europe, books filled with strange symbols, drawings of dragons, and coded recipes. Many of these documents use the language of the Grail to describe their work. They speak of the vessel of transformation and the blood of the king. So, were the stories in the books true? If you are an alchemist, the answer is a resounding yes. But the truth is a metaphorical one. The Grail is the human mind, and the blood is the life force that animates us. The search for the Grail is the search for the secret of life itself. The hidden documents of the alchemists are still being decoded today. Every time a historian finds a new manuscript in a library in Prague or Paris, we get a little closer to understanding what these people actually believed. They weren't just trying to make gold. They were trying to understand the fabric of reality. They believed that the Grail was a key that could unlock the secrets of the universe. This brings a different kind of spookiness to our story. It suggests that the Grail is not a thing that is lost, but a secret that is hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone with the right knowledge to see it. It is a story about the power of the mind and the mysteries of the natural world. As we look at the low fire in the hearth, we can imagine the alchemists hunched over their scrolls, their faces lit by the glow of their furnaces, searching for the stone from the stars that would change everything. Their books are still with us, waiting for us to read them. We cannot talk about hidden documents and the truth of the Grail books without addressing the most famous secret of the modern age, the idea that the Grail is a bloodline. This story was popularized by books like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and the Da Vinci Code. The truth of this story supposedly rested on a series of hidden documents found in the National Library of France, the dossier secrets. These documents claim to prove that there was a secret society called the Priory of Sion that had been guarding the bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene for 2,000 years. For a few decades, the world was captivated by this report. It felt like the ultimate hidden document discovery. It turned the search for the Grail into a detective story involving the Merovingian kings of France and the mysterious village of Rennes-le-Château. But as we peel back the layers of this story, we find a much darker, more human truth. In the 1990s, it was revealed that the dossier secrets were a total fabrication. They had been created and planted in the library in the 1960s by a man named Pierre Plantard. He was a con artist who wanted to create a prestigious pedigree for himself. So the hidden documents were real objects. You can still go to the library and see them today, but the information they contained was a lie. This is a vital lesson in our search for the truth. Just because a document is hidden or ancient-looking does not mean it is true. Humans have been creating hidden documents to support their own agendas for as long as we have been writing. However, even a hoax can contain a grain of truth. While the Priory of Sion was a fake, the idea that the Grail could be a bloodline was not new. It had been whispered in the shadows of the royal courts of Europe for centuries. There were families who believed they were descended from sacred lineages, and they used the language of the Grail to describe their royal blood. The meaning of the bloodline story is about the desire for a living connection to the past. People want to believe that the sacred is not just a cup on a shelf, but is something that lives on in the veins of people today. It is a story about the continuity of life and the importance of family. The books about the bloodline were not true in a historical sense, but they were true in the way they captured the imagination of millions of people. They showed us that the mystery of the Grail is still powerful enough to change the way we look at history and religion. But as the spooky, cozy light of truth dawned on the Plantard hoax, we were reminded to be careful. In the world of the Grail, the line between a secret and a lie is very, very thin. We must always look for the evidence, the provenance, and the cold, hard reality of the paper and the ink. The story of the bloodline is a cautionary tale for our journey. It reminds us that the most exciting truth is often the one we have to be the most skeptical of. As we reach the final part of our journey tonight, we must look at a report that is unfolding right now, in our own time. In a small, quiet village in Poland called Warszczyny, archaeologists have recently made a discovery that feels like it was taken straight from the pages of a Grail romance. They used ground-penetrating radar to look beneath the floor of an ancient chapel built by the Knights Templar. What they found was a series of hidden crypts and a secret underground tunnel. But more importantly, they found documents, written not on paper, but in the very soil and stone of the site. There are legends in this region that say the Templars brought a great treasure here after they fled from France. A treasure that included the Holy Grail. The legend says they sunk a wooden box filled with gold and a sacred vessel into a nearby lake to keep it from the hands of their enemies. The discovery of the crypts has provided the first real physical evidence that the Templars in this area were hiding something. They found the remains of knights buried with great honor, and they found secret passages that lead to unknown parts of the town. Are these the hidden documents we have been looking for? In a way, yes. Archaeological finds are the most honest documents we have. They don't lie to us like a poet might, and they aren't forged like the dossier's secrets. They are the physical remnants of the lives people actually lived. As the excavation continues, the world is waiting to see what is in the final, sealed crypt. Will it be a cup, a stone, a cloth, or something else entirely? The truth might be that the treasure the Templars were guarding was not an object at all, but the knowledge of how to build a better world. Or perhaps it was a collection of manuscripts that told a story the church didn't want the world to hear. The story of the Polish crypt brings us back to where we started. It shows us that the truth of the Grail is still being searched for. The books are still being written and the documents are still being found. So to answer your question, are the stories in the books true? Some are in their own way. Is there any unknown hidden document? Almost certainly. History is too long and the world is too large for everything to have been found. There are libraries in monasteries, vaults in palaces, and crypts under churches that have not been opened in hundreds of years. The truth of the Holy Grail is a living thing. It is a mystery that changes with every new discovery and every new generation of seekers. It is a story that refuses to die because we refuse to stop looking for it. The rain is still falling outside, and the library is very quiet now. The shadows are long, and the fire has turned to embers. But in the dark, the stories are still there, waiting for the next person to come looking for the search for the last person. To see the Holy Grail is not a simple search for a single name in a registry. Instead, it is a journey through different layers of history, belief, and the quiet whispers of those who claim to have held the impossible in their hands. To find the last person on record, we must first decide which Grail we are looking for. Because there are many, and each one has its own final witness. Its own person who stood in the shadows and saw the light reflecting off the surface of a mystery. If we look back into the deepest parts of history, before the legends of King Arthur were even a glimmer in a poet's eye, we find the story of a man named Arculf. He is perhaps the most important, last witness, because he is the last person to leave a written record of seeing a relic in Jerusalem that everyone believed was the true cup. The year was around 670, a time when the world was shifting and the ancient ways were beginning to fade. Arculf was a Frankish bishop who had traveled across the sea to visit the holy sites of the East. He spent 9 months in Jerusalem, walking the narrow streets and breathing in the scent of incense and old stone. According to the records kept by a monk named Adamnan, who met Arculf after he was shipwrecked on the coast of Scotland on his way home, the bishop saw the chalice in a small building located between the great basilicas of the city. He described it as a silver cup, one that had 2 handles and was kept in a chest. He told Adamnan that he had actually reached out and touched it, that he had put his fingers through the handles and felt the cold metal. This is the last historical record we have of a witness seeing the vessel in its original home in Jerusalem. Shortly after Arculf's visit, the trail goes cold. The city was swept up in the changing tides of empires, and the cup seemed to vanish into the mist of time. For hundreds of years, Arculf was the last person the world could point to and say, he was there, and he saw it. But history has a way of hiding things only to let them be found again by those with the right kind of eyes. If we follow the path of the Grail into the heart of Spain, we encounter the story of the Valencia chalice. And here, the list of witnesses becomes much more modern and much more personal. For centuries, this cup was kept in the dark, hidden away in the reliquary of the Valencia Cathedral. But in the 20th century, during the terrifying days of the Spanish Civil War, the Grail needed a protector who was not a knight in armor, but a simple woman with a brave heart. Her name was Sabina Sui. In 1936, as the fires of war began to consume the city, the priests of the cathedral knew they had to hide their greatest treasure. They entrusted the chalice to Sabina, the sister of one of the church workers. For many months, Sabina was the last person. to truly see and hold the Grail in a world that had forgotten how to be holy. She hid the cup in her own home, sometimes beneath the floorboards, sometimes inside a cushion, and even, as the stories go, at the bottom of a chest of drawers. She lived with the constant fear that soldiers would come to her door, yet she remained silent. Every night she was the one who checked on the vessel, making sure it was safe. To her, it was not a legendary object of power. It was a sacred trust that she had to keep alive. When the war finally ended and the cup was returned to the cathedral, she became a quiet legend. The woman who had slept in the same room as the Grail when the rest of the world was in darkness. In our own time, the list of witnesses has grown to include some of the most famous figures in the world. If we accept the Valencia chalice as the true Grail, a claim supported by many historians and even archaeologists who date the upper agate bowl to the 1st century, then the last person to see it is not a secret at all. In 2006, Pope Benedict XVI visited Valencia. He did not just look at the chalice through a glass case. He held it. He used it to celebrate a great mass in the open air, lifting the vessel up for thousands of people to see. In that moment, the Grail was no longer a mystery hidden in a vault. It was a living object used for the very purpose it was created for. Before him, Pope John Paul II had done the same in 1982. These men are the recorded witnesses of the modern age, the ones who have touched the stone and felt the weight of 2,000 years of history. But there is another story, one that takes us to the rainy hills of England and a small wooden bowl known as the Nanteo's cup. For a long time, this simple vessel was believed by many to be the true Grail, brought to Britain by Joseph of Arimathea. The last person to see this Grail is often a person in need. For generations, the family who owned the cup would allow pilgrims to visit it, people who were sick or dying, and believed that a single sip from the wood would heal them. The records of the Nanteo's cup are filled with the names of ordinary people from the 19th and early 20th centuries who came to the old manor house to see the relic. To them, the Grail was not about kings or popes. It was about the touch of a hand on a piece of ancient wood and the hope of a miracle. The cup was eventually stolen and then recovered, and today it sits in the National Library of Wales, seen by librarians and scholars who treat it with a quiet, scholarly reverence. If we look at the most recent claims of discovery, we find the names of researchers who believe they have found the true record of the Grail's location. In 2014, the historians Margarita Torres and José Miguel Ortega del Rio published their findings on the cup of Dona Araca in Leon. They spent years tracking down ancient documents in Cairo that pointed to this specific cup as the one used in Jerusalem. For them, the act of seeing the Grail was an intellectual awakening, a moment when the puzzle pieces finally clicked into place. They are the last witnesses of the library and the archive, the ones who saw the truth hidden behind the gold and the jewels of a medieval masterpiece. And then there are those who believe the Grail is something that cannot be kept in a museum at all. Some believe the last person to see the Grail was a man named Graham Phillips, a researcher who in the 1990s followed a trail of clues to a small stone cup hidden inside a statue in an old English estate. He called it the Hawkstone Grail. For a brief moment, he was the person on record who held an object that seemed to fit every description of the ancient Marian chalice. Whether it was the true Grail or not, for him, the experience was a culmination of a lifetime of searching. So, who is the truly last person on record to see the Holy Grail? The answer depends on which door you choose to open. Is it the Pope standing before a crowd of thousands in Spain? Is it the researcher holding a stone cup in a dusty attic? Or is it the ghost of a bishop from the 7th century, shipwrecked on a lonely island, telling stories of a silver cup in a city of gold? Perhaps the most honest answer is that the last person is always the one who is looking for it with a sincere heart. The Grail is a mirror, and when you look into the stories of those who have seen it, you are really seeing a reflection of our own desire to find something that lasts forever. The mystery of the witness is a quiet one. It reminds us that while objects can be lost or stolen or hidden away, the act of seeing is a gift that is passed from one person to another through the stories we tell. Every time someone like you asks about the Grail, you become part of that record, a witness to the legend that refuses to fade. Welcome to Ambient Whisper, the place where the world slows down and the mysteries of the past come to sit by the fire with us. Tonight, we are embarking on a journey that spans 2,000 years. A search for an object that is more than just a cup, more than just a relic. We are looking for the Holy Grail. Settle into your favorite chair. Perhaps you have a warm drink nearby. Let the steam rise and the scent of it ground you in this moment. We have a long path ahead of us, 10 parts of a story that has shaped the history of the world. We will walk through ancient Jerusalem, climb the misty tors of Britain, and hide in the secret crypts of Spain. The story of the Grail is a story of human longing, of our desire to touch something that is truly sacred. It is a story of knights and poets, of kings and simple people, and of the silence that follows a miracle. The shadows of the upper room. To understand where the story begins, we have to travel back in time, back to a city made of white stone and golden light. Imagine yourself in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. The air is warm, smelling of dust and dried herbs and the faint, sweet scent of cedar wood burning in a hearth. The sun is setting, casting long, purple shadows across the narrow streets. People are hurrying home, their footsteps echoing on the paving stones as the day comes to a quiet end. In a certain part of the city, there is a house. It is an unassuming place, built of thick stone walls meant to keep out the heat of the day. There is an upper room in this house, a space that feels separate from the rest of the world. It is a room filled with a deep, expectant silence. The light from a few flickering oil lamps dances on the walls, creating shadows that seem to move with a life of their own. In the center of this room sits a table. Around it, 13 men have gathered for a meal. It is a simple meal: bread, wine, and the quiet conversation of friends who have traveled a long road together. At the center of the table is a vessel. We do not know for certain what it looked like then. Some say it was a humble bowl carved from wood. Others believe it was a simple cup made of clay or perhaps a piece of local stone. It was not the gold and jeweled chalice we see in the movies. It was something that belonged to the everyday life of a working man. The moment that changed everything was a quiet one. There was the sound of wine being poured, a soft, liquid whisper in the stillness. A blessing was spoken, words that felt heavy with a meaning that the men at the table were only beginning to understand. This cup was passed from hand to hand. Each man felt the texture of it, the cool surface of the stone or the grain of the wood. They drank from it, and in doing so they became part of a mystery that would outlast the Roman Empire and the very city they were sitting in. When the meal was over and the men had left for the Garden of Gethsemane, the cup remained. It sat there on the wooden table, a few drops of red wine still clinging to the bottom. The room was empty now, but the air felt different. It felt charged, as if the room itself was holding on to the memory of what had just happened. In the days that followed, the cup did not disappear. It was not discarded. There was a man named Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy man, a man of standing, who had been a secret follower of the teacher from Nazareth. The stories tell us that Joseph was given the task of caring for the body after the execution. But he did something else too. He went back to that upper room. He found the cup. Imagine Joseph standing in that silent room. The lamps have burned out and the morning light is gray and cold. He picks up the vessel, feeling its weight in his hands. He knows that this is no longer just a cup. It has become a witness. The legends say that Joseph took the cup to the place of the execution, that he stood at the foot of the cross and used the vessel to catch the blood that fell from the wounds. This is the moment the Grail was truly born. It was no longer a vessel for wine. It was a vessel for life. It was a container for the divine essence that had come into the world. Joseph wrapped the cup in a clean linen cloth, much like he would wrap the body itself. He hid it away, protecting it from the soldiers and the authorities who were searching for any remnant of the movement. For a long time, the cup stayed in the shadows of Jerusalem. It moved from house to house, passed between the hands of the first believers. It was a secret kept in the heart of the city. But the world was changing. Jerusalem was a place of tension and violence. The Roman legions were tightening their grip. The early church knew that their treasures, both their people and their relics, were not safe. There are documents that hint at a meeting of the elders, a quiet gathering in a cellar or a cave outside the city walls. They decided that the cup had to leave. It had to be taken to the edges of the known world, to a place where the reach of Rome was thin and the ancient spirits of the earth still held sway. Joseph of Arimathea was chosen for this journey. He was a merchant, a man who knew the trade routes that stretched across the sea. He had ships that traveled as far as the tin mines of the north. He took the cup, still wrapped in its linen cloth, and boarded a vessel. The journey was long and slow. The sea was often gray and restless, the waves whispering against the wooden hull of the ship. Joseph would sit on the deck at night, looking up at the stars, the same stars that had shone over the garden in Jerusalem. He held the bundle in his lap, feeling the solid shape of the cup through the cloth. He felt a heavy responsibility, the weight of a secret that the whole world would eventually go looking for. As the ship sailed through the Pillars of Hercules and into the vast, open Atlantic, the air turned cold and damp. The bright light of the Mediterranean was replaced by the soft, misty greens of the north. They were heading for a land that the Romans called Britannia, a land of fog and forests and old, mysterious magic. They arrived at a place called Avalon, a name that sounds like a sigh in the wind. In those days, it was an island surrounded by marshes and reeds, dominated by a great hill that rose up like a sleeping giant. Joseph stepped onto the shore, his feet sinking into the soft mud. He carried the cup with him, a lone man with a treasure that was meant to heal the world. The story says that when Joseph reached the top of the hill, he leaned on his staff to rest. The staff was made of hawthorn wood from the Holy Land. As he pushed it into the earth, it took root. It began to grow, even though it was the middle of winter. It sprouted white flowers that smelled of honey and hope. This was the first sign that the Grail had found a new home. Joseph did not build a grand temple for the cup. He built a simple church made of wattles and daub, a humble place that mirrored the upper room in Jerusalem. He placed the cup in a hidden space beneath the altar, and he settled there to guard it. He became the first of the Grail keepers, a line of silent guardians who would watch over the vessel for centuries. As Joseph grew old, the landscape around Avalon began to change. The marshes were drained, and the island became part of the mainland. The small church grew into a great abbey, Glastonbury, but the cup remained hidden. It was no longer an object that people could see or touch. It had moved into the realm of the spirit. People began to hear rumors of a mysterious object kept in the West. They spoke of a vessel that could provide endless food, that could heal the sick, and that could grant a vision of the divine to those who were pure of heart. The story of the cup in the upper room had become the legend of the Holy Grail. The silence of the upper room had been replaced by the silence of the misty hills of Britain. But the search was only just beginning. The world would not let the cup stay hidden forever. Kings would dream of it, and knights would ride out into the dark forests to find it. The blood that Joseph had caught in the cup was calling out to the world, and the world was starting to listen. Take a deep breath and feel the stillness of this moment. The first part of our journey is complete. We have seen the cup in the hands of the teacher, and we have seen it carried across the sea to the edges of the world. The mystery is planted now, like the hawthorn tree on the hill, and it is waiting to grow. In our next part, we will follow the trail of the Grail through the eyes of the knights who sought it. We will see how a simple cup became the center of a world of chivalry and magic, and how the search for the Grail became a search for the very soul of humanity. But for now, just rest. Let the image of the upper room and the misty hills of Avalon stay with you. The Grail is safe in the shadows, and the night is young. The blood of the earth and the hidden spring. The mist never truly leaves the valley of Glastonbury. It just hides in the tall grass and the hollows of the ancient trees, waiting for the sun to dip below the horizon. If you were to walk there today, you would feel a strange pull from the earth itself. It is a heavy, grounded energy that speaks of things buried deep, of secrets that have been resting for 2,000 years. When Joseph of Arimathea arrived at this place, he brought with him more than just an object. He brought a change in the very nature of the land. The legends tell us that after Joseph built his small, humble church, he realized that the Grail was too precious to be kept above ground where the eyes of the curious might find it. He needed a place that was part of the world but separate from it. He found a spring at the foot of the great hill, the Tor. The water that flowed from this spring was strange. It was not clear like the other streams in the area. It was a deep, rusty red, a color that reminded Joseph of the wine in the upper room and the blood he had collected at the cross. He believed that the earth was mirroring the sacred mystery he carried. The story goes that Joseph took the Grail and buried it deep within the source of the spring. He placed it in a stone chamber, far below the reach of any shovel or spade. As soon as the vessel touched the water, the spring began to flow with even greater power. The red color became more intense and the water took on a metallic, iron-like taste. This became known as the Chalice Well. For centuries, people have come to this spot to drink the red water. They say it has the power to heal the body and quiet the mind. But what they are really drinking is the essence of the Grail, the energy of the vessel that is hidden beneath the rocks. The blood of the earth is the physical manifestation of the spiritual truth that Joseph brought from the east. Imagine the scene. The quiet valley, the sound of the water trickling over the stones, and the scent of damp earth and moss. There is a peace here that is hard to find anywhere else. It is a place where the barrier between our world and the other world is very thin. The Grail is not just an object in this story. It is a living presence that has merged with the landscape. As the centuries passed, the memory of Joseph began to fade into the realm of myth. The simple church of wattles was replaced by the stone walls of a great abbey. The monks who lived there knew the stories, but they also knew the danger of speaking too openly. They became the new keepers of the secret. They watched over the well and they watched over the pilgrims who came seeking a miracle. But the world outside was not peaceful. The Roman Empire fell, and the land of Britain was plunged into a time of darkness and war. Invaders came from across the sea. Tribes of people who did not know the stories of the cup or the teacher from Nazareth. They brought their own gods and their own magic. The abbey was burned and the monks were scattered. Yet the Grail remained. Hidden deep within the earth, protected by the red water, it was safe from the fires and the swords of the invaders. It became a silent witness to the rise and fall of kingdoms. It was waiting for the time when the world would be ready to look for it again. During this dark age, the story of the Grail took on a new shape. It moved from the quiet prayers of the monks into the songs of the bards. In the smoky halls of the local lords, poets would sing of a magical vessel that could feed 100 men and heal any wound. They did not always call it the Grail. Sometimes it was a cauldron, a great iron pot that belonged to the ancient gods of the land. This is where the story gets truly interesting. The Christian story of the cup and the Celtic story of the cauldron began to bleed into each other, much like the red water of the spring. The Grail became a bridge between two worlds. It was both a holy relic and a magical artifact. It was something that belonged to the church, but it also belonged to the earth itself. The meaning of this is profound. It suggests that the sacred is not something that is far away in the sky. It is something that is right beneath our feet. The blood of the earth is a reminder that the divine is present in the water we drink and the soil we walk on. The Grail is the connection between the human and the divine, between the physical and the spiritual. There is a specific feeling to the stories from this time, a feeling of longing and loss. The people of Britain felt like they had lost something precious, and they were searching for a way to find it again. They looked to the hills and the springs, hoping for a glimpse of the mystery. In the next part of our vlog, we will see how this longing gave birth to the greatest cycle of stories in the history of the world. We will meet the king who tried to bring order to the chaos, and the knights who rode out into the forest of adventure to find the vessel that Joseph had hidden. The search was moving from the silence of the well into the action of the quest. But for now, just listen to the sound of the water. Imagine the red spring flowing from the dark earth, carrying the secret of the Grail into the light of day. The earth remembers even when we forget. The Grail is still there, resting in the cool darkness, waiting for the next seeker to arrive. Rest now and let the red water wash away the worries of the day. The journey is long, but we are moving at a slow, peaceful pace. The mysteries of the earth are patient, and so are we. The King and the Round Table. The air in the forest of Va-len-see-a is thick with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. It is a place where the light filters down through the leaves in long, golden shafts, and the silence is so deep it feels like you can hear the heartbeat of the world. This is the landscape of the quest, the place where the legend of the Grail truly took flight. In the middle of the Dark Ages, a figure emerged who would change the story of the Grail forever. His name was Arthur. He was a king who dreamed of a world of justice and peace, a world where the strong protected the weak. He built a great hall called Camelot, and in the center of that hall he placed a table. This was the Round Table. It was not just a piece of furniture, it was a symbol. It was a circle with no head and no foot, a place where every man was equal. The knights who sat there were the best of the best, men of courage and honor. But even as Camelot flourished, there was a sense that something was missing. The world was still a place of suffering and imperfection. The story says that one evening, as the knights were gathered for a feast, the hall suddenly went silent. A beam of light, 7 times brighter than the sun, entered the room. And in that light, covered in a white samite cloth, the Grail appeared. It moved through the air, floating above the table, and as it passed, every knight found that the food before him was exactly what he most desired. Then, as quickly as it had come, the vessel vanished. The hall was left in darkness, and the knights were left in awe. They realized that they had been given a glimpse of the divine, a vision of a perfection that was beyond the world they knew. One by one, the knights stood up and made a vow. They swore that they would leave Camelot and ride out into the world to find the Grail. They would not return until they had seen the vessel uncovered and understood its mystery. This was the beginning of the great quest. This part of the story is full of a beautiful, meandering pace. The knights did not travel in a group. They each chose their own path, entering the forest at the point where it was darkest and there was no way or path. This is a powerful metaphor for our own lives. The search for the sacred is a solitary journey. No one can find the Grail for you. You have to find it yourself. As the knights rode through the forest, they encountered many wonders and many dangers. They met hermits who lived in caves and spoke in riddles. They found abandoned chapels where the wind whistled through the stones. They faced giants and dragons and their own inner demons. The quest for the Grail was not just an adventure. It was a spiritual trial. The vessel could not be found by strength or skill alone. It could only be seen by those who were pure of heart. Many of the greatest knights, like Lancelot, found that their own flaws and mistakes kept them from the goal. They could see the light of the Grail from a distance, but they could not reach it. The knight who finally succeeded was a young man named Galahad. He was the son of Lancelot, but he possessed a purity that his father lacked. He was the perfect knight. When he finally reached the castle where the Grail was kept, the castle of Corbenic, he was allowed to look inside the vessel. What did he see? The stories do not say. Some things are too sacred for words. but the experience changed him completely. He had seen the heart of the mystery, and the world of Camelot no longer held any meaning for him. He was taken up into heaven, and the Grail went with him. This ending is bittersweet. It suggests that the Grail is something that cannot stay in our world. It is a vision of perfection that we can strive for, but we can never fully possess. Camelot began to fall apart after the quest. The knights were scattered, and the dream of a perfect world faded away. But the story of the quest lived on. It became a map for the human soul. It taught us that the most important journey is the one we take inside ourselves. The Grail is the symbol of that hidden, sacred part of us that we are all searching for. Think about the knights in the forest. Imagine the sound of the horses' hooves on the soft ground and the clinking of their armor. Feel the sense of wonder and the fear of the unknown. We are all like those knights, riding through the dark forests of our own lives, looking for a glimpse of the light. The story of Arthur and his knights is a cozy, spooky tale for the ages. It is a story of great halls and dark forests, of bright armor and deep shadows. It reminds us that even in the midst of war and chaos, there is always the possibility of a miracle. Take a moment to reflect on your own quest. What are you looking for? What is your Grail? Let the silence of the forest of Va-len-see-a settle over you. The quest is ongoing, and the path is always there, waiting for you to take the first step. In our next part, we will leave the world of legend and enter the world of history. We will look at a group of men who were more than just knights in a story. Men who may have actually found the Grail in the ruins of Jerusalem. We are moving into the shadow of the temple, but for now, just rest. The fire is low, and the stories of Camelot are drifting away like smoke. The Grail is safe, and so are you. The Knights of the Temple. The wind blows cold and sharp through the ruins of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It is a place where the stones themselves seem to be whispering the secrets of the thousands of years of history they have witnessed. In the early 12th century, a small group of 9 men arrived at this spot. They were knights, but they were also monks. They called themselves the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. We know them as the Knights Templar. For the first 9 years of their existence, these men did not fight any battles. They did not guard the roads for pilgrims, which was their stated purpose. Instead, they lived in the ruins of the temple, and they spent their time digging. Imagine the scene: the darkness of the tunnels beneath the mount, the flickering torchlight reflecting off the damp stone walls, the sound of picks and shovels echoing in the silence. What were they looking for? Some say they were searching for the Ark of the Covenant. Others believe they were looking for ancient scrolls of wisdom. But the most persistent legend says that they were looking for the Holy Grail. The story tells us that they found it. Deep within a hidden chamber, protected by seals and symbols that had not been seen for 1,000 years, they discovered the vessel that Joseph of Arimathea had once guarded. They found the cup of the upper room, and perhaps something more. The secret knowledge that the cup represented. When the Templars finally emerged from the ruins, they were no longer a small, poor group of knights. They suddenly became the most powerful and wealthy organization in the world. They were given special privileges by the Pope. They built massive cathedrals and fortresses across Europe, and they created the first international banking system. How did this happen? Many believe that their wealth and power came from the Grail itself. Not because the cup turned lead into gold, but because the secret it contained gave them leverage over the kings and the church. They possessed a truth that was so powerful it could shake the foundations of the world. The Templars became the new Grail keepers. They did not hide the vessel in a well or a forest. They hid it in plain sight, within the architecture of their buildings and the rituals of their order. If you look at the cathedrals they helped build, like Chartres in France, you will see symbols of the Grail everywhere. In the stained glass, in the carvings of the stone, in the very layout of the floor. The Templars were masters of symbolism. They knew that the best way to keep a secret was to hide it in a language that only the initiated could understand. For the public, The Grail was a legend of King Arthur. For the Templars, it was a living reality that guided their every move. But power and secrecy always attract enemies. The kings of Europe grew jealous of the Templars' wealth, and the Church began to fear their influence. In the early 14th century, the King of France, Philip the Fair, decided to destroy the order. On a Friday the 13th in 1307, thousands of Templars were arrested across France. They were accused of terrible crimes: heresy, devil worship, and spitting on the cross. They were tortured until they confessed, and many were burned at the stake. The order was officially dissolved and their properties were seized. But there was one thing the king could not find: the treasure. The legends say that on the night before the arrests, a small group of knights escaped from Paris with several large chests. They were seen heading for the coast, where a fleet of Templar ships was waiting. Where did the treasure go? Where was the Grail taken? This is one of the greatest mysteries of history. Some believe the ship sailed to Scotland, where the knights found refuge with the St. Clair family at Roz-lin Chapel. Others say they sailed to the mountains of Portugal or the forests of Germany. Some even believe they crossed the Atlantic and hidden the Grail in the New World, long before Columbus arrived. The story of the Templars is a spooky, cozy tale of hidden tunnels and secret codes. It is a story of men who stood in the shadows of the temple and found something that changed the course of history. It reminds us that the truth is often much more complex than the stories we are told. Think about the nights in the tunnels beneath Jerusalem. Feel the weight of the silence and the coldness of the stone. Imagine the secrets they held and the sacrifices they made to protect them. We are all searching for our own temple, a place where we can find the truth about ourselves and the world. The Grail moved from the world of myth into the world of power with the Templars. But even when the order was destroyed, the vessel remained. It had been moved again, hidden in a new place, waiting for the next chapter of its journey to begin. Take a moment to reflect on the secrets you carry. What are the things you guard in the temple of your own heart? Let the mystery of the Templars settle over you like a warm blanket. The search is long, but the path is full of wonder. In our next part, we will follow the trail of the Grail to the sunny hills of Spain. We will look at a physical object that many believe is the actual cup from the temple, an object that you can still see today. We are moving into the light of the Spanish sun, but for now, just rest. The torches in the tunnels have gone out, and the knights have sailed away into the mist. The Grail is safe, and so are you. The red agate of Valencia. The sun in eastern Spain has a way of turning everything it touches into gold. The light is bright and clear, reflecting off the blue Mediterranean and the ancient stones of the city of Valencia. If you walk into the great cathedral there, you will find a small, quiet chapel tucked away from the main altar. Inside a glass case, resting on a velvet cushion, sits an object that has been the focus of devotion for hundreds of years: the Santo Cáliz. This is not a golden cup. It is a small bowl made of dark, reddish-brown agate. It is simple and unassuming, the kind of object that could easily be overlooked. But if you look closer, you will see that this simple bowl has been given a magnificent setting. It is held in a gold frame with two handles, decorated with pearls and emeralds and other precious gems. The history of this cup is a fascinating journey through the heart of Europe. The report says that it was brought to Spain in the 3rd century by a young deacon named Lawrence. He was from the region of Aragon, and he had been sent to Rome to serve the church. When the Roman authorities began to persecute the Christians and seize their treasures, the Pope entrusted Lawrence with the most precious thing they had: the cup used by Jesus. Lawrence knew he could not keep the cup in Rome. He sent it to his family's home in the mountains of northern Spain. For hundreds of years, the cup was hidden in the rugged peaks of the Pyrenees, moving from one isolated monastery to another. It was a secret kept by the monks of Aragon, protected by the vertical walls of stone and the deep, silent valleys. In the year 1399, The cup was given to the King of Aragon, Martin the Humanist. He recognized its value and kept it in the royal palace. Eventually, in 1437, it was moved to the cathedral in Valencia, where it has remained ever since. What makes this report so compelling is the physical evidence of the object itself. In the 1960s, a professor named Antonio Beltran conducted a detailed study of the agate bowl. He found that the style of the carving and the type of stone used were common in the workshops of the Middle East during the 1st century before Christ. This means that, unlike almost every other candidate for the Grail, the Valencia cup is actually old enough to have been in Jerusalem at the right time. Imagine the journey this small bowl has taken. From a workshop in the East to a table in Jerusalem, to the catacombs of Rome, to the frozen peaks of the Pyrenees, and finally to the sun-drenched chapel in Valencia. It has survived the fall of empires, the invasion of the Moors, the terrors of the Inquisition, and the violence of the Spanish Civil War. During the Civil War in the 1930s, the cup had to be hidden once again. A brave woman named Sabina Sui took the vessel from the cathedral and hid it in her home. She moved it from place to place, sometimes hiding it in a mattress or behind a loose stone in the wall. She lived in constant fear of the soldiers who were looking for religious relics to destroy, but she remained faithful to her task, and the cup survived. When you stand before the Valencia chalice today, you feel a sense of stillness. It is a physical link to a past that often feels like a dream. It is a reminder that the Grail is not just a symbol. It is a thing that can be touched and seen. But the story of the Spanish Grail doesn't end in Valencia. Just a few hours away, in the city of Leon, there is another chalice that has recently made headlines. The chalice of Dona Urraca. For a long time, it was just another beautiful piece of church treasure. But in 2014, 2 historians found ancient scrolls in Cairo that pointed to this specific cup as the one used by Christ. The scrolls tell a story of how the cup was stolen from Jerusalem and taken to Egypt, and then later gifted to the King of Leon as a peace offering during a famine. Like the Valencia cup, the Dona Urraca chalice is a simple stone bowl hidden inside a jeweled casing. And like the Valencia cup, the stone bowl inside has been dated to the 1st century. So, we are left with a mystery. 2 cups in 2 Spanish cities, both with archaeological evidence and historical reports that lead back to Jerusalem. Which one is the true Grail? Perhaps they both are in a way. Perhaps the Grail is not about a single object, but about the story we tell ourselves about it. The Spanish Grail is a story of survival and devotion. It is a story of how humans will go to any length to protect something they believe is sacred. It reminds us that the light of the sun can be found even in the darkest corners of history. Take a deep breath and feel the warmth of the Spanish sun on your face. Imagine the red agate bowl in your hands, feeling its smooth, cool surface. We have moved from the mist of Britain to the clarity of Spain, and the journey is far from over. In our next part, we will look at a version of the Grail that is not a cup at all. We will explore the idea that the Grail was a stone from the stars, a piece of the divine that fell to earth. We are moving into the realm of the alchemists, but for now, just rest. The bells of the Valencia Cathedral are ringing in the distance, and the shadows in the chapel are long and peaceful. The Grail is safe, and so are you. The fire has settled into a deep, pulsing orange, and the room is filled with the soft, comforting scent of cedar and old paper. We have traveled far already, through the deserts of the east and the green hills of the west. But now the air grows a bit colder, a bit more mysterious. We are moving away from the world of wooden cups and stone bowls, and into a world where the Grail is made of something that does not belong to this earth. The emerald from the stars. There is a specific kind of silence that falls over the German forests in the middle of winter. It is a heavy, frozen silence, where the only sound is the occasional crack of a frost-laden branch or the soft, muffled thud of snow falling from a pine bough. In the early 13th century, a man named Wolfram von Eschenbach sat in a room much like this one, watching the shadows dance on the wall. He was a poet, a knight, and a man who claimed to have heard a version of the Grail story that no one else knew. Wolfram did not believe the Grail was a cup. In his great book, Parzival, he described the Grail as something far more strange and ancient. He called it the lapis exilis. To the ears of those sitting around the hearth, this name sounded like a secret code. It translated to the small stone, or the stone that fell from heaven. Imagine a night billions of years ago, long before there were humans to look at the sky or poets to write songs. The legend says that there was a great war in the heavens, a battle between light and shadow. In the heat of that conflict, a magnificent emerald was struck from the crown of the morning star as he fell from the heights of the celestial realm. This stone did not burn up in the atmosphere. It fell through the blackness of space, a streak of green light against the velvet dark, and it landed softly upon the earth. This emerald was the Grail. Wolfram's story tells us that this stone was not just a piece of rock. It was a vessel of pure light and life. It was guarded by a group of knights called the Templars, who lived in a hidden castle on a mountain called Munselvish, the Mountain of Salvation. These knights did not eat or drink like ordinary men. They were sustained entirely by the presence of the stone. Every year on a specific holy day, a white dove would descend from the sky and place a small, round wafer upon the stone, and from that moment, the stone would provide everything the knights needed to live. The air in Wolfram's story feels different. It feels alchemical. It smells of sulfur and ozone and the sharp, metallic tang of a blacksmith's forge. The Grail as a stone is a story about transformation. The alchemists of the Middle Ages were obsessed with this idea. They believed that there was a substance, the philosopher's stone, that could turn lead into gold and grant eternal life. For them, Wolfram's stone was the ultimate goal. They believed that the Grail was not something you could hold in your hand, but a state of being that you had to create within your own soul. Think about the texture of an emerald. It is cold to the touch, but it seems to hold a fire deep within its green depths. Wolfram said that the stone had the power to keep a person young forever. If a man looked at the stone every day, he would never grow old and his hair would never turn gray. But there was a catch. The stone could only be seen and served by those who were perfectly pure. If a person with a clouded heart approached the mountain, the path would simply vanish, and they would find themselves wandering in the gray mist until they were lost. This version of the story carries a heavy weight of evidence in the world of the occult and the hidden sciences. In the city of Toledo, Spain, which was a great center of learning where Christian, Jewish, and Muslim scholars worked together, there were ancient manuscripts that spoke of heavenly stones with miraculous powers. Wolfram claimed his source was a man named Coyote the Provençal, who had found a forgotten manuscript in Toledo written by a man named Phlegetones. Phlegetones was said to be a descendant of the ancient astronomers who could read the secrets of the universe in the movement of the stars. Is it possible that the Grail was actually a meteorite, a piece of another world that landed in the ancient past and was worshipped as a divine object? It would explain why so many different cultures have stories of sacred stones. The black stone in the Kaaba in Mecca, the stone of destiny in Scotland, the emerald of the alchemists, these are all echoes of the same idea. The meaning of the stone Grail is deep and a bit spooky. It tells us that we are not alone in the universe, that things from the above can fall into the below and change us. It suggests that the quest for the Grail is not a journey across the land, but a journey of the mind. To find the stone, you have to become like the stone, clear, hard, and filled with light. As you listen to the crackle of the fire, imagine the green glow of that emerald resting on a mountain top in the clouds. Imagine the silence of the Templars and knights as they stand guard over the mystery. The world of the stone is a world of perfection, but it is a cold perfection. It is a reminder that the divine is often beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The poet Wolfram eventually stopped writing, leaving his story for others to finish. But the idea of the lapis exilis remained, floating in the collective memory of humanity like a star in the night sky. The Grail was no longer just a cup used by a man. It was a piece of the cosmos itself. Take a long, slow breath. The emerald is still out there, hidden on its mountain, waiting for someone with a heart of glass to find the path. The story of the stone is a bridge to our next part, where we leave the mountain and enter the dusty, silent halls of the great archives. We are going to look for the papers and the parchments that were never meant to be read. But for now, just stay here in the green light of the dream. The forest is quiet and the stars are watching. The Grail is safe and so are you. The silence of the secret archives. The smell of an ancient archive is something you never forget. It is the scent of thousands of years of human thought, trapped in the fibers of parchment and the dried ink of a million pens. It is a heavy, still air, an air that feels like it hasn't moved since the Middle Ages. To find the truth about the Holy Grail, we must leave the forests and the mountains and descend into the deep, subterranean vaults of the world's most secret libraries. Imagine yourself walking down a long, narrow corridor beneath the streets of Rome. The walls are made of cool gray stone, and the only light comes from the small, dim bulbs spaced far apart along the ceiling. Your footsteps make a soft, rhythmic sound. Tap, 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 against the floor. This is the Vatican Apostolic Archive. For centuries it was known as the Secret Archive, a place where only the Pope and his most trusted advisors could go. On these shelves, stretching for over 50 miles, are the records of every king, every war, and every miracle the Church has ever known. And hidden among these millions of pages are the documents that speak of the Grail. One of the most important of these, hidden documents, was only rediscovered in the year 2001. It is known as the Chinon parchment. For 700 years it was lost in the archives, misplaced by a clerk in the 17th century. When it was finally found, it changed everything we knew about the Knights Templar, the men who were said to be the keepers of the Grail. The parchment is a long, yellowed piece of sheepskin, covered in the tight, cramped handwriting of a 14th century notary. It is a record of the trial of the leaders of the Templars. For centuries, the official story was that the Templars were heretics who were destroyed because they had turned away from God. But the Chinon parchment tells a different story. It shows that the Pope had actually found them innocent. He wanted to save them. But the document was hidden away and the world was told a lie for 700 years. Why was it hidden? Because the truth was too dangerous. The Templars possessed something, or knew something, that the kings of Europe could not allow to be public. If the Grail they found in Jerusalem was not an object but a document, a scroll that contained the true history of the early church, it would have destroyed the power of the papacy and the divine right of kings. Imagine a scroll written in the 1st century that told a different story of the life of the teacher from Nazareth. A story without the gold and the jewels, a story of a human man and a human family. This would be a Grail, made of ink and paper, a vessel of information that was more powerful than any cup. But the Vatican is not the only place with secret papers. In the city of Cairo, in the library of the Al-Azhar University, there are scrolls that speak of a sacred vessel that was taken from Jerusalem during the time of the Crusades. These are the documents that led the Spanish historians to the chalice in Leon. These scrolls were not meant for Christian eyes. They were internal reports written by Muslim officials detailing the movement of treasures across the Mediterranean. They are true, in a way that legends are not. They are the receipts of history. And then there is the mystery of Roz-lin Chapel in Scotland. This small, ornate stone building is often called a library in stone. Every inch of its walls is covered in intricate carvings, plants, stars, angels, and strange geometric patterns. Many believe that the documents of the Grail are not written on paper at all, but are carved into the very walls of this chapel. There is a legend that the Sinclair family who built the chapel were the final guardians of the Templar treasure. They say that deep beneath the stone floor, in a vault that has not been opened in 500 years, lies the physical evidence of the Grail. There are reports of explorers who have used ground-penetrating radar to look into the earth beneath Roz-lin. They have found large, rectangular voids, spaces that could hold chests of scrolls or the vessel itself. But the family refuses to allow any digging. They say that some things are better left in the dark. The silence of the archives is a deliberate silence. It is a choice made by those in power to keep the world from knowing too much. They believe that the Grail is a secret that could cause chaos if it were ever fully revealed. The truth is a heavy burden, and they have decided to carry it so that we don't have to. But for those of us who listen to the whispers of history, the silence itself is a clue. Every misplaced document, every lost scroll, and every forbidden vault is a piece of the puzzle. We are like detectives, looking for the gaps in the story, the places where the ink has been rubbed away or the page has been torn out. As you sit in the quiet of your own space, think about the power of a single piece of paper. Think about how a few words, written hundreds of years ago, can still change the world today. The Grail is hidden in the silence between the words. It is in the space where the history books stop and the secrets begin. The air in the archive is starting to feel thin. It is time for us to leave the vaults and come back up into the light, but we are taking something with us. The knowledge that the hidden documents are real. They are out there, resting in the dark, waiting for someone to find them and tell their story. In our next part, we will look at a Grail that is not made of stone or gold or paper. We will look at a piece of cloth, a simple linen shroud that some believe is the true vessel of the blood of Christ. We are moving from the library to the tomb. But for now, just rest. The archivists have locked the doors and the lamps in the Vatican have been turned off. The secrets are safe in the dark, and so are you. The cloth of many names. The air changes when you move from the world of cold stone and dusty paper into the presence of something that was once meant to touch human skin. There is a softness to it, a vulnerability. We have spent much of our journey looking for a cup or a stone, but there is an unpopular and deeply compelling report that the Holy Grail was never an object meant for drinking at all. Instead, it was a piece of cloth. Imagine a long, narrow strip of linen, woven in a complex herringbone pattern that was common in the ancient Middle East. The fabric is a pale, creamy color, but it is stained with the marks of time. Scorched by fire, water-damaged by centuries of dampness, and marked with the faint, ghostly image of a man. This is the Shroud of Turin. Now you might ask, how could a burial cloth be the Holy Grail? The answer lies in the words themselves. In the old languages of Europe, the term for the Grail was often written as sang-greal. For a long time, people thought this meant sang-real, or royal blood. But if you move the space between the letters just a little bit, it becomes Sinden Greal. In Latin and ancient Greek, sinden means a fine linen cloth, a shroud. The story of the cloth Grail is a story of a hidden image. In the centuries after the events in Jerusalem, there were reports of a miraculous object known as the Mandilion. It was said to be a cloth that bore the true likeness of the teacher from Nazareth. Not a painting made by human hands, but an image formed by a miracle. For a long time, the Mandilion was kept in the city of Edessa and later in Constantinople. It was described as being folded inside a golden frame so that only the face was visible. This is where the legend of the Grail in a vessel might have started. The vessel was the golden frame and the Grail was the cloth inside it. When the Crusaders sacked Constantinople in 1204, the Mandilion disappeared. Shortly after that, the Knights Templar began to be accused of worshipping a mysterious head, or a bearded image, in their secret ceremonies. Many historians now believe that the Templars had stolen the cloth and were guarding it as their most sacred treasure. They were the ones who realized that the Grail was the record of the physical body of the divine, the blood and the sweat and the image left behind on the linen. The evidence for this is fascinating. When you look at the early stories of the Grail quest, like the one written by Crescent de Troyes, the Grail is often described as being carried in a procession, and it is always covered by a white samite cloth. The poets may have been using a code. They couldn't talk openly about the shroud because it was a relic that the church and the kings were fighting over. So they turned the cloth into a cup and they turned the blood into a drink. But the meaning of the cloth Grail is much more intimate than a cup of gold. A cup is something you use to take something in. A shroud is something that wraps you when you are most alone. It is a story about the fragile human side of the divine. It suggests that the Grail is a reminder of our own mortality and the possibility of something coming after it. There is a specific feeling to the shroud, a sense of being in the presence of a ghost. When you look at the image on the cloth, you are looking at a photographic negative that was created hundreds of years before the invention of the camera. Scientists have studied the shroud for decades, and they still cannot explain how the image was formed. It is a document written in light and shadow, a hidden document. That is made of thread instead of paper. Think about the texture of the linen. Imagine the hands that wove it, the hands that wrapped the body in it, and the hands of the Templars who hid it in a chest and carried it across the sea. The cloth has traveled from the tomb in Jerusalem to the palaces of the East to the secret chapels of the Knights, and finally to the cathedral in Italy where it rests today. The report of the cloth Grail is unpopular because it takes away the magic of the cup. It makes the story more grounded, more physical. It tells us that the treasure is not a magical object that gives us whatever we want, but a silent witness to a moment of profound suffering and hope. In the quiet of the night, as you feel the fabric of your own blankets or the clothes you are wearing, think about the stories that a piece of cloth can tell. We leave traces of ourselves on everything we touch. The Grail, if it is a cloth, is the ultimate trace, the physical memory of a life that changed the world. The mystery of the shroud is like a long, slow exhale. It is a story that doesn't need to shout to be heard. It sits in its silver chest in Turin, waiting for the next time it is brought into the light. We are moving toward the end of our journey now. We have seen the stones, the gold, the papers, and the cloth, but there is one more version of the Grail we must explore, a version that is perhaps the most true of all because it is the most humble. We are going to look for the Grail in the hands of the poor, but for now, just rest. Let the image of the folded linen and the ghostly face stay with you. The mystery is soft and quiet, and the night is nearly over. The Grail is safe, and so are you. The mazer of the humble. We have spent so much time looking at emeralds from the stars and jeweled chalices in Spanish cathedrals. But there is a quiet, persistent report that says we have been looking at the wrong things all along. This is the story of the Grail of the poor. It is a story that doesn't care about kings or knights or secret societies. It is a story about the simple, everyday objects that hold the most power. Imagine a small wooden bowl. It is carved from a single piece of dark, polished wood, perhaps olive or wych elm. It is not decorated with pearls or gold. It has no handles. It is just a bowl, the kind that a carpenter or a fisherman would use to eat a simple meal of porridge or bread. In the language of the Middle Ages, this kind of bowl was called a mazer. The report says that the true Grail was a mazer. The logic behind this is beautiful in its simplicity. If the teacher from Nazareth was a man who lived among the poor, a man who spoke against the accumulation of riches, why would he use a golden cup or a rare agate bowl for his final meal? He would have used what was on the table, a common wooden bowl that belonged to the family who owned the house. For centuries, there have been wooden bowls across Europe that have claimed to be the true Grail. The most famous is the Nanteo's cup in Wales. For a long time, it was kept in a grand old manor house, and people would travel for hundreds of miles just to touch it. They believed that if they drank water from this wooden fragment, they would be cured of any illness. The bowl was so worn down by the touch of thousands of hands and lips that only a small, jagged piece of it remains today. When science finally looked at the Nantio's cup, the report was a bit heartbreaking for some. The wood was dated to the 14th century, long after the events in Jerusalem. But the truth of the mazer is not about the date of the wood. It is about the idea it represents. The Grail of the poor is a story about humility. It tells us that the most sacred things in the world are often the most ordinary. It suggests that we don't need to go on a grand quest to find the divine. We can find it in our own kitchens, in the simple act of sharing a meal with someone we love. The vessel is not as important as what it holds, and what the Grail holds is the spirit of service and love. There is a specific kind of spookiness to this story, too. It is the spookiness of the hidden in plain sight. While the kings were fighting over golden relics and the knights were wandering in the forests, the true Grail might have been sitting on a shelf in a peasant's cottage, being used every day to feed a hungry child. The ultimate secret is that the thing everyone is looking for is something they already have. Think about the objects in your own life that have meaning to you. It might not be a piece of jewelry or an expensive gadget. It might be an old cup that belonged to your grandmother, or a wooden spoon that has been used to cook 1,000 family dinners. These are your mazers. They are the vessels that hold your history and your heart. The meaning of the wooden Grail is a lesson for our modern world. We are so obsessed with having the newest, the brightest, and the most expensive things. We think that if we just find the right object, we will be happy. But the Grail tells us that happiness and the sacred are found in the simple, the worn, and the humble. As we reach the final chapters of our story, the image of the wooden bowl is a grounding one. It brings us back to the earth, back to the upper room, and back to the reality of the people who first touched the vessel. The last person on record. To see the Grail might not have been a pope or a king, but a nameless woman in a Welsh village who took a sip of water from a wooden bowl and felt, for a moment, that she was not alone. The fire in our hearth is almost out now. The room is filled with a soft, gray light, the light that comes just before the dawn. Our journey is nearly complete. We have seen the Grail in all its forms. As a cup, a stone, a cloth, a document, and a bowl. In our final part, we will reflect on what the search for the Grail means for us today. We will look at the quest that never ends and the silence that still waits for us in the dark corners of the world. We are coming home, but for now, just rest. Imagine the feel of the cool, smooth wood of the mazer in your hands. Feel the weight of the water inside it. The mystery is simple and close, and the night is over. The Grail is safe, and so are you. The unending quest. The sun is just beginning to peek over the horizon, casting a pale, pink glow over the world. The long night of stories is coming to an end, but the mystery we have been chasing is still there, waiting in the morning mist. We have walked through 2,000 years of history, looked into the eyes of knights and alchemists, and touched the surfaces of stone and wood. But as we reach the end of our vlog, we have to ask the final question. Where is the Grail now? The truth is, the Grail is everywhere and nowhere. If you are looking for a physical object that you can hold in your hand and use to perform miracles, you might be searching for a ghost. The reports we have discussed, the cups in Spain, the cloth in Italy, the stone in the mountains, are all real objects. They have real histories and real power, but none of them can be proven to be the Grail with absolute certainty. And perhaps that is exactly how it is supposed to be. The truth of the Holy Grail is that it is a quest that never ends. It is a symbol of the human spirit's refusal to accept a world that is only made of physical things. We want there to be something more, something sacred, something hidden, something that can heal the wounds of the world. As long as we are looking for the Grail, we are acknowledging that there is a light in the darkness. In our modern world, the quest has taken on a new shape. We no longer ride horses into dark forests, but we search through digital archives and use satellites to look at the Earth. We look for the Grail in the code of our DNA, in the mathematics of the stars, and in the deep psychology of our own minds. We are still the knights of the Round Table. We are just wearing different armor. The meaning of the Grail for us today is about the search for purpose. In a world that often feels cold and chaotic, the idea of a sacred vessel gives us a center. It reminds us that there are things worth protecting, things worth searching for, and things that are more important than ourselves. The hidden documents of the Grail are still being written. They are written in the ways we care for each other, in the art we create, and in the quiet moments of reflection when we listen to the whispers of the past. The Grail is a mirror. When we look for it, we are really looking for the best version of ourselves. As you go about your day, whether you are working, waiting for a flight, or just taking a long walk, carry the story of the Grail with you. Think about the silence of the upper room, the red water of the Glastonbury spring, and the green light of the emerald stone. Let these images be a warm blanket for your mind, a way to find a little bit of the cozy spooky in your everyday life. The search for the Grail is not about the destination. It is about the person you become along the way. It is about the curiosity that keeps you asking questions and the hope that keeps you looking around the next corner. The fire in the hearth has turned to white ash, and the room is full of the light of a new day. Our journey together is finished for now, but the quest continues. The Grail is out there, in a chapel, in a library, in a forest, or perhaps right there in your own heart, waiting for you to notice it. I hope this long walk through the mystery has brought you a sense of peace and a little bit of wonder. The world is a strange and beautiful place, and there are still so many secrets left to find. Stay curious, stay kind, and remember that the most important mysteries are the ones that stay with us in the silence. When we hear that word, we often think of a golden cup or a mystical vessel from the legends of King Arthur. We think of knights and long, dusty roads. But in the winter of 2025, the word Grail has taken on a new meaning. It has become a title for the ultimate prize in three very different worlds: the deep, dark ocean, the silent aisles of ancient cathedrals, and the vast, unknown reaches of our own skies. So lean back, find a comfortable spot. Let the world outside fade away into a soft blur. We are going on a journey to find the only Grails that remain, and the secrets they are finally beginning to whisper. Imagine, if you will, the Caribbean Sea. Not the bright, turquoise water of a postcard, but the deep, heavy blue of the open ocean. If you were to travel down past the light, past the colorful fish, you would eventually find a place of absolute silence. At 600 meters below the surface, the pressure is immense. It is a cold, dark world where time seems to have stopped. And there, resting in the silt of the sea floor, lies the San Jose. For over 300 years. This ship was the ultimate ghost. It was called the Holy Grail of shipwrecks, not because of a religious relic, but because of what was inside its wooden ribs. It was a Spanish galleon, and when it sank in 1708, it took with it a fortune that defies the imagination. Gold, silver, chests filled with emeralds. It is estimated that the treasure resting there is worth nearly $20 billion. But for the longest time, it was just a legend, a story told by sailors. That changed recently. In the final months of 2025, the mystery of the San Jose has moved from the realm of legend into the light of the present day. The Colombian government has begun a process that many thought would never happen. They have sent robotic arms, controlled by scientists far above on the surface, down into that crushing darkness. There is something deeply moving about watching these mechanical hands gently brush away 3 centuries of sand. In late November, the world saw the first fruits of this labor. It was not a chest of gold, but something perhaps more haunting. A bronze cannon. When it was brought into the light of the surface, it still bore the markings of the foundry where it was cast. It was a heavy, silent witness to a battle that happened hundreds of years ago. Along with the cannon, the researchers recovered 3 gold macuquinas. These are hand-struck coins, rough around the edges, each one unique. To hold one is to hold a piece of 1707, the year they were minted in Lima. But the most delicate discovery was a single Chinese porcelain cup. It sat on the sea floor for 3 centuries, perfectly preserved while the great wooden ship around it decayed. It reminds us that even in the middle of a war for gold and power, there were these small, fragile pieces of beauty. The news from the site tells us that the mystery of why the ship sank is also being rewritten. We always believed it exploded in a great ball of fire during a battle with the British. But the high-resolution images taken in December 2025 show something different. The hull seems to have collapsed under its own weight. It suggests that the ship was so heavily loaded with treasure, so burdened by the very wealth it was meant to carry, that it was doomed before the first shot was even fired. It is a quiet, somber thought. The treasure itself may have been the weight that pulled those 600 souls into the deep. Now, let us move away from the salt air of the Caribbean and travel to the old, winding streets of Genoa, Italy. Here, inside the Cathedral of San Lorenzo, there is a different kind of Grail. If you were to walk into the treasury of the cathedral, your eyes would eventually fall upon a hexagonal bowl. It glows with a faint, otherworldly green light. This is the Sacro Catino. For centuries, this was believed to be the only material grail in existence. The story goes that when the Crusaders took the city of Caesarea in 1101, they found this vessel. They were struck by its beauty and its vibrant green color. They believed it was carved from a single massive emerald. More importantly, they believed it was the dish used by Jesus during the Last Supper. For hundreds of years, it was guarded as the most precious object in the world. People traveled from across the continent just to catch a glimpse of its green glow. But history is often more complicated than our legends. When Napoleon Bonaparte took the bowl to Paris in the early 19th century, it was accidentally broken. And in that moment, the secret was revealed. It was not emerald. It was glass. But do not let that diminish the mystery. In late 2025, new scientific analysis has breathed fresh life into the story of the Sacro Catino. Researchers have been using non-invasive lasers to study the chemical composition of that green glass. What they found is fascinating. It is not just any glass. It is a type of Byzantine glass that was incredibly rare and difficult to produce. The mineral markers in the glass point to a very specific set of workshops in the Levant region. These workshops were known to produce vessels only for the highest religious ceremonies and for the most elite members of society during the 1st century. So, while it may not be a giant emerald, it is still a physical link to a specific time and place. The news from December suggests that this bowl may actually be older than we previously thought. It is not just a medieval creation. It is a survivor. It has traveled through wars, through the rise and fall of empires, and through the hands of kings and thieves. It remains the only physical object that carries the weight of the Grail legend with such a documented physical history. Standing in its presence even now, people report a feeling of deep, quiet peace. We have looked into the sea and into the cathedrals of the past, but there is one more Grail that people are searching for in 2025. It is a Grail that does not sit on a shelf or rest on the sea floor. It is the Grail of truth. In the community of those who look at the stars and wonder if we are alone, the word Grail is used to describe a single, undeniable piece of evidence. They call it disclosure. For decades, we have lived with grainy photos and blurry videos. We have heard stories of lights in the sky that move in ways no human aircraft can. But there has always been a shadow of doubt. In the last few weeks of this year, that shadow has started to thin. There is a report that has become the talk of the scientific and intelligence communities. It is titled the Immaculate Constellation. Those who have seen parts of it describe it as the Holy Grail of data. It is said to contain high-definition, multi-sensor recordings of objects that move from the vacuum of space, through our atmosphere, and deep into our oceans without slowing down. In December 2025, leaked summaries of this report have suggested something even more profound. The data apparently shows that these objects are not just visiting. They are interacting with our world in a way that is structured and deliberate. At the same time, a different kind of news has emerged from the world of film. Steven Spielberg, a man who has spent his life telling stories about the stars, is finishing a project simply called Disclosure. Rumors from the set in early December suggest that this is not just a science fiction movie. It is being described as a grounded, realistic exploration of what would happen to our society, to our religions and our economies, if the Grail of truth were finally revealed. It feels as though we are standing on the edge of a great cliff. We are looking out into the mist, waiting for the wind to blow it away so we can finally see what is on the other side. This is the modern Grail. It is the search for an answer to the oldest question we have ever asked. Are we alone? It is interesting, is it not, how these three stories all converge in the final days of 2025. We have the San Jose, representing the Grail of our physical history and our lost wealth. We have the Sacro Catino, representing the Grail of our faith and our connection to the ancient world. And we have the Immaculate Constellation, representing the Grail of our future and our place in the universe. Each of these Grails requires a different kind of search. To find the San Jose, we needed advanced robotics and the courage to look into the dark of the ocean. To understand the Sacro Catino, we needed the patience of science and the respect for history. And to find the truth in our skies, we need the bravery to accept an answer that might change everything we think we know. But perhaps the most important thing about the Grail is not the object itself. It is the search. The search is what brings us together. It is what makes us build ships and laboratories and telescopes. It is what makes us tell stories by the fireside and dream of things we cannot yet see. The news from 2025 tells us that we are getting closer. We are pulling the bronze cannons from the silt. We are analyzing the green glass with lasers. We are cataloging the lights in the sky. We are moving, slowly and steadily, toward a moment of clarity. But even when the last ship is raised and the last mystery is solved, I suspect we will find a new Grail to look for. It is in our nature to keep searching, to keep wondering what lies just beyond the next horizon. As the night grows deeper and the air grows still, take a moment to think about your own search. What is the mystery that keeps you looking at the stars or wondering about the deep? We are all explorers in our own way, navigating the quiet waters of our lives, looking for that one thing that will make everything make sense. For now, the Grails remain both found and lost. They are here in our museums and on our computer screens, but their true essence remains just out of reach, waiting for the next chapter of our story. It is time to let the thoughts of gold and green glass and silver lights drift away. The world is quiet now. The search can wait for tomorrow. The sea is calm. The cathedral is silent, and the stars are watching over us, just as they have for thousands of years.